Run, party, repeat. Welcome to the East Coast Adventures Dirt and Vert Podcast, where we talk all things running, racing, and training to help you get ready for your next big adventure.
Learn from our successes and our failures, and have fun at the same time. Join us right here every week with inspiring guests who share their captivating tales from the trails. And remember, nobody cares.
Run faster.
All right, welcome back to the Dirt and Vert Podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Matt.
And we have Stewart Ellington with us today, also AKA, for everybody that knows him, we go by Stu. So Stu is kind of a Knoxville legend around here. He's got some pretty fast times, and he's got some really cool stories that he's going to share with us today. But before we get started into all of that, Stu, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into running.
Kind of an interesting story how I got into running. I played soccer all my life growing up. I was the son of a career Navy guy, and we lived all over the world and all over the U.S. And I was in high school and fought all the time. About once a week, I was into a fight with someone, and I would escalate. Severe, brutally cystic acne, no social circles, and just this angst. And one of my friends, his name was Ben Medina, he talked me into running cross country. And I almost don't want to say it, but I was embarrassed. I thought cross country was a travel group. I didn't know it was running. And so I started running cross country, and it solved all my issues. I had an outlet for this angst. I had a social circle. I had something I could just pour my work into. It solved all my problems, and ran in high school, and I just really had linear progression, just improved year after year. And I always had a great environment where I had faster people than me. And went to college to UT. I took a book scholarship at UT because I thought it was the best environment. Improved there every year. And then really my freshman year, I had a chance to do what a lot of people never get to do. And I got to work out with the equivalent of Michael Jordan of running at the time, and that was Todd Williams. He had made an Olympic team. He had just won USA Cross. Every high school kid would have a backwards Adidas hat and Adidas spikes, and they wanted to emulate Todd Williams, and I got a chance to train with him. And during my time at UT, I just had this linear improvement year after year after year. And it was the same thing. I poured any angst I had into running, and it became my purpose, my identity. And not only that, it helped me pay for school, it helped me travel. And even when I got into graduate school, part of my interview process, I'm a nurse anesthetist at Park West Hospital, but even during the interview process, I put some of my track accolades down on my resume. And really competitive to get into school. And I still remember a guy named Dr. Hallway. He got really agitated that I had put this on my resume. He said, "This is a hospital. We're looking at a medical program, and you put down that you ran track." I said, "Yeah." And he got more salty, and he goes, "This is a hospital, a medical program, but you ran track." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "How is that relevant?" I'm not terribly articulate, especially under pressure, but I said, it's the same formula for anything. If you put in long-term work and ability to handle pressure or a test or a race or a relationship, it's all the same formula. And if I can demonstrate that for cross country, I can demonstrate that at the hospital. And I got into that program, and I'm kind of living my dream job. And even since I've been coaching over the years, I've tried to impress upon people that even some of these middle school kids I coach, that this is the same formula you're going to live for the rest of your life. If you can do work when people can't or won't, and you can handle your business, that's the same formula,
Yeah.
I love that answer,
Yeah.
by the way.
Well, thank you.
That was a great answer under pressure, too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank
Because
you.
I'm sure at that point, like, you probably were feeling a little stressed of like, okay, this guy's calling me out.
Well, I did have to
Yeah.
write that down.
Yeah. It's funny because running has solved all the issues I've had in my life. And intermittently, I'm a reluctant runner, but at the same time, without it, I'm a bit of a hollow shell. You know what I mean? And and you give me a chance to run, and even in college when I had success there and I was All-American, I'm amazed at how that title has followed me for the last 30 years. You know, I mean, you do something big on one day and everything else falls in line after that. And it's just amazing what the proper outlet with the proper training can do for you.
Yep.
Well, and to your point, it teaches such good fundamentals
Mhm.
for life, because in running, you have to be consistent.
Yep.
You have to put the work in.
You have to.
Yeah.
And things don't always go the way you want them to go.
I think that teaches a lot of resiliency.
Yes. And
Yep.
it's easy to give up on anything.
Yeah. Sure.
But I feel like that's one sport where if you give up, you're never going to reap the benefit of learning what you can endure just in life in general, because it teaches you that things are hard. They're going to get hard. But if you put the work in, hard becomes a little easier.
Sure.
Slowly.
Yep.
Sure.
So going back to high school, how old were you when you started running?
I was a sophomore in high school, and as I alluded to earlier, my dad was in the military, and so I went to 2 different high schools. My brother went to 3 different high schools, so we moved around a lot. But if you found that you were a runner going into a new school and they had a good running team, it was pretty easy to make friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you end up at UT?
That's kind of another fascinating story. So I was pretty well set on going to school on the West Coast since I went to high school in California. And they actually wrote a newspaper article about how I ended up at UT. It's I've got a clip of it somewhere. But long story short, my mom's family is originally from Memphis, and we happened to be flipping channels when in 1991 UT won the NCAA title in track.
Oh, cool.
And at the time, I'm looking at going to Long Beach State, Fresno State, Stanford, somewhere on the West Coast. And my mom called the UT coach. She cold called him, and she didn't.
Mom.
Yeah, she didn't know what events I ran. She didn't know what my times were. She didn't know anything. But luckily, Coach Brown wrote my name down and gave me a recruiting trip. And I came out with Tony Cozy on that same week, and he eventually made the Olympic team, and we were roommates my freshman year. But came out and found it to be a good fit, and gave up a lot of full scholarships for a book scholarship at UT. And from that point forward, I've just got immersed in a great environment, and it was a little bit bizarre looking back, because my freshman year, every day I was so aggressive in practice and so ambitious that by the end of my freshman year, I had trouble walking to practice, let alone finishing practices. But as I tell a lot of my runners that I coach, the longer you toil in something before you see results, typically the greater the results will be when you finally get to them. And so I found my sophomore year, I had made big gains, and I was running easier in practice and faster, and the races were going faster. And just I had that great environment where I had fast people around me and good support, and just got faster and faster after that.
So what do you attribute the big gains to in your sophomore year? Just sticking with it, or
I think just toiling through that freshman year where I did all the mileage I could, I did all the workouts I could, and I think it was just acclimating to the workload and getting used to everything. And then there's probably got to be a psychological point where I said I can do anything. I'll do back-to-back workouts, and finally you get to a point where sub 5-minute pace doesn't feel awful in practice, and then going to the track and running 420 mile doesn't feel awful. And I think it was just aggressive, just accumulative mileage and workouts over a course of a year, and it finally kicked in.
It's funny to hear you say 420, but
not around that.
I completely understand what you're saying though, because like I had never done a marathon until this past year.
Yep.
I just kind of skipped that and got into ultras. I did some 5Ks, half marathons, and I was just like, oh, let's try an ultra, and just kind of got hooked from that. So Mary actually built me a marathon training block this last year, and I did that, and that's what led me all the way up to that 50 miler at Yeti.
Where you won, right?
Yeah, but damn, like all I can say is you're exactly right. It's like not 420 by no means, but for me, just running 640s, 620s.
Yeah.
For 10 miles, for
Yeah.
12 miles. Like at first when she was like, it was like on and off, we were doing some strides and stuff like that. But then we got into where we were doing, certain times. I can't remember the exact times we would do. And I just remembered like the first couple, I was like, man, this is miserable.
Yeah.
This sucks. Like, and I just kept telling her, I was like, who wants to run a marathon? And by the time the marathon got here, I was so nervous about running a 640, just trying, because I wanted to go 3 hours. That was my
that's a
goal.
good mark. That's a big mark.
And so nervous. I ended up with strep and COVID 2 weeks before, and I ended up running like a 3:11. But that pace did not bother me at all once I got to going. It was just like, I'm about 14 miles in. I think COVID kind of caught up to me at that point. But when I did Damn Yeti, I mean, I started at like a 6:47-minute pace, and I held that for, I don't know, 30, 40 miles. I don't know, and didn't even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand, like, what you're saying is like, yeah, it sucks in the beginning, but you slowly,
Your body adapts to it.
Your body adapts, and you get used to that feeling, and it's not as bad every time.
But it's funny too, there's so much mutual respect, because my best events in college were 5K and 10K, and you put your head down, you could grind for 13 minutes and change or 29 minutes and change, but it's a far different animal than saying, hey, I'm going to run today and overnight and tomorrow. And it's a different animal. And 5K and 10K guys don't want to run for 100 miles. They have no concept of it. But you go talk to the ultra guys and they're like, oh, that's what we do.
Yeah.
But they also don't want to run a 5K. That's 5-minute pace.
It's like when we tell like the group.
There is definitely mutual respect.
It's mutually exclusive too. You can't be a good 5K and a good 100 miler.
We tell the group like, hey, we're going to go do a 5K. I'd rather run 100 miles. I'm like, yeah, we can be done at like 19, 18 minutes. Like, yeah, no, that hurts too bad. I'm like, you're right. It hurts for that period of time. It is awful, but you're done.
Yeah.
So what was your fastest 1 mile time?
I ran a 3:49 1500, but I wasn't really a good miler by miler standards. So I ran 3:49 1500, which is like a 4:06, 4:07 mile. And then 5K I was 13:55. I was fourth in NCAAs, and 10K I was 29:04. My junior year, that was the fastest domestic college time that year. Wow. But that was also the trough of U.S. distance running. If you look year after year after year, I just happened to be good during the slowest time for U.S. college distance running. So maybe I timed it well. I mean, the times I ran that were really at the top of the peak, maybe 5 or 10 years later, didn't even get you to nationals. Because we had some other guys that ran the same times at UT, and they didn't even get to the big show, which is just amazing to me.
Well, I'm starting to see that. I think this is just my personal opinion, but I think it comes in cycles.
It does.
Yeah. Because, just like Boston Marathon now, we are seeing, just like Boston Marathon, we're seeing where they're still increasing the qualifying times.
They're getting faster.
They just shaved another 5 minutes off of everybody's qualifying standard.
Yeah.
And I feel like at one point, didn't they, years ago, they loosened them, because they didn't have enough people.
Everyone's getting faster. The super shoes are probably part of it.
Well, like this year, I'm like, I only got to run a 3 hour. That's what my qualifying time is.
That's a good time.
Well, now it's 2:55. Plus, you got to have your 5 minute buffer.
Yeah.
Even get so now you're running the 2:50.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm out close for 3 hours. I was like,
Stu's sitting here thinking, lace up your shoes, boy.
I know it. He's like, 2:38 here.
But, I have an observation about ultra runners and trail runners, and I alluded to this earlier, that a lot of road racers have this, they're chippy and they're aggressive, and there's a lot of rank and file, but all my friends that are ultra runners or trail runners are absolutely unprovocable. They're just so mellow and pseudo high and just the easiest people ever to get along with. And I've got a lot of respect for that. I want to be a trail runner, but I don't have the lift. And I want to be an ultra runner, but I might have the gut issues and fueling issues. But I think those are my people. But for now, I'm sticking to the roads because that's easier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, like I've said this on the podcast before, but when I started running, like trail, I started with these guys. But once I went to Knoxville, I started doing some of their races. Like you said, they're a little more like,
Yeah.
So like I feel like
chippy.
I feel like I didn't fit in because they were like a little more aggressive. Trails and they're like, hey man, what do you need? Like,
Oh, they're awesome.
What
They
are you
bring their own
doing? Like,
beer.
how you feeling? You need help? What do you need? The road, like if you're down on the side of the road, they're like, nah, you're out.
They usually got a girlfriend with them and a dog, and they're gonna have a fire afterwards.
Yeah.
Everyone's cool,
Yeah.
I'm kind of branching into a different type thing now. I think I'm topped out as fast as I can run, and so now my big deficit has been strength stuff, and so now I'm doing a lot of these hybrid races, and I haven't changed my sport for 30 years, but now I'm doing a lot of these hybrid races where you run and then you do a strength event, and then you run and you do a strength event. And I kind of like it because I think for the next couple of years that I'll have this linear progression that I had in college, where every single time I go out to one of these hybrid races, I should see improvement. And you're 50 years old. That's kind of a nice thing to have,
Yeah, I definitely want us to talk about High Rocks later.
Oh man, I love High Rocks.
I want to end on that one. I think that'll be fun to talk about.
Yeah.
So you go through your college career. You obviously did very well. What did you say you were ranked in the NCAA?
I finished, my best finish was 4th indoors. I finished 18th in cross country. I finished 4-time All-American and then 4-time academic All-American. If my brother watches this, I still feel bad. He was a 3-time All-American, and he was on the bubble to qualify for his 4th time to NCAAs, and he probably would have been All-American. And when he didn't qualify, I called to tell him that I was going to always be a 4-time and he could be a 3-time. Just kind of an asshole move. I still feel badly that I left him a message saying, I'm the older brother. I got 4. You got 3.
Where did he go to college at?
He went to UT.
Oh, cool.
And we're different people. But he went to UT and finally really started getting into a groove training-wise. Incredible leg speed, and we were hyper competitive, and Todd Williams, my Olympic friend, would always just get that fire going between the two of us. But I mean, he was easily sub 4-minute mile on a relay carry, and just got stronger and stronger and stronger. So my senior year, I did a lot of work trying to hold him off. And then my brother moved back to the area where we grew up, and he's formed a business in San Francisco, and he's killing it. He's absolutely, when he got married, he wanted a photo booth. He thought it'd be entertaining, and it was expensive, and it was tough to set up, and he thought he could do better. And so he started setting up photo booths. Then he had 30 of them. And then he started getting celebrities wanting photo booths, and Golden Globes 1-on-1, and Apple 1-on-1, and Tesla 1-on-1.
Really cool.
Yeah.
And so he started doing that, and now he puts them in bars. He knows how to build a bar-proof photo booth. So he puts them in bars. The bars keep a certain percentage, and then he keeps a certain percentage.
I didn't realize there was anything in this world bar-proof.
We've got some experience. So he's built those, and his newest venture, he's traveled all over the U.S., all over the world. He opened a photo booth museum in San Francisco, and there's a waiting line when he opens up in the morning, and he's got this photo booth museum from these digital photo booths, and he just, a lot like y'all, he thinks of something, he's like, I'm going to do this, and there's really no one to lead the way, and he's like, I can handle this, and he just goes with it. And I love that ambition, especially when you don't have leadership in front of you. And he's kind of just been a savant. He's like, I can figure this out, and his company's absolutely killing it.
I'm sure that Mike and Matt and James and Micah hate to get a text from me some days.
No, I like it. I'm like, oh, what are we doing this week? We're trying something new this week.
I've never stopped learning.
I think it's healthy. People stagnate when they get to a certain age and they get to a certain comfort level. No one wants to get uncomfortable learning a new skill, but y'all aren't afraid of that.
Well, like he'll send something like, hey, I want to learn this, or we're doing this. I'm like, I guess we're all learning this week, or
which is, I just cleared my to-do list this week, and I'm so happy. And your to-do list will never be clear.
No.
I mean, it's funny because I've not even told anybody this. I think Mary might have told one or two people, but like the whole time I've been doing all this, like I've also been getting my coaching certification just to get it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get it because I thought it'd help me with the podcast. So
absolutely.
I got one module left and I'll be done. It's been like, it's been a very eye-opening thing for me.
Yeah.
It's funny. I've had a couple people tell me on the podcast, they're like, you must be really listening to Mary. And it's, just because of the things that I've been saying. And Mary's like, what? That's probably some of it, but he's also, and then she told him that I was getting my certification and they're like, I knew something was different.
It's always good reinforcement when someone says, you must be really listening to your girlfriend. I think that says something right, Yeah. So, and it's funny. I talk about coaching a lot, and it's been my favorite responsibility. I coached the middle school team at Farragut for years, and then I helped out some with the high school team. But you would see these kids come in, and the majority of it's conditioning and keeping it fun so they come back next year. Mm-hmm. But in between that, there's a lot of development in terms of taking someone that's meek and maybe insecure and building them up and showing them that they can do work and develop. And then I've got to watch the best show there is, where I'll have an athlete come in as a sixth grader, and then by the time I see them graduate high school, they've got it. They know how to do work, and they know how to handle their business. And now I've had a very small part of watching this person grow up. Yeah. And they're so appreciative. And the parents of cross country and track runners are so appreciative. And it's, some of these poor athletes, I've known them since they're sixth grade, and then I'll see them driving. I'm like, what are you doing driving? I'm like, I've got my license. I go, no, not that. It's just, you're this little kid I met when you were this little, you shouldn't be driving. And then, they're fully licensed, everything else, but you just aren't prepared to see people grow up so quick. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine. So what grades have you coached?
For a while, I helped out with a Farragut middle school cross country team, and then I took over as head coach for 5 years, and then I've been helping Kevin McDonald out the past couple years with it. And then on top of that, probably the easier thing was I helped out with the Farragut High School track team, and I didn't do much of the administrative stuff with that. Chris Allison did a lot of that, and so I got to do workouts with the kids and do a lot of individual coaching with them. And so, I mean, who wouldn't want to show up and do your workouts with a bunch of fabulous high school kids, and then do just some basic, easy build-up coaching, and then go out and watch them race and absolutely kill it. I mean, it's the best show there is. And then Coach Allison would do all the administrative stuff. So I got all of the positives without having to be weighed down by all of the work. Yeah. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you graduated college, was there any opportunities to stop running, or did you continue the whole time that you were?
I kind of just lucked into a great opportunity. So I finished up at UT in '96, and Adidas came to me and they offered me what they call a bread and butter type program, where Adidas National would pay all my travel, all my equipment, and I could basically travel to any race I wanted. And so all the guys that were on that national team just made incredible progress. I was the only one that was working a full-time job. And on top of that, I was working as a nurse on night shift at St. Mary's and still doing 2 workouts a day. And I was very foolish. I thought I can handle all this and everything else, but night shift takes a toll. 2 days takes a toll. Everyone else either made a world champs team or an Olympic team. I was one of the few Adidas national athletes that stagnated. I didn't make any other teams, but they treated me like a guy should treat a girl. Like, we would go to races and they had sent a scout out ahead of time for all the restaurants and all the hotels. You go to your hotel room and there'd be a duffel bag full of gifts. They'd rent out a bar with a band, and then you give other athletes invites there. I mean, they just treated me so grandly, and I ran for them for 3 years. I wanted to make progress. I kind of just stagnated, but everyone else made massive progress. And if I'm being tactful, I think I was very helpful with Todd Williams doing his workouts, Tony Cozy doing his workouts, and I helped them make Olympic teams by doing a lot of the workouts with them. But After that, I sent them a quit letter, and I went to graduate school shortly after that. And even at that point, they sent me a very nice gift in the mail and a very nice letter, and they were just so fabulous to me.
That's good.
Awesome.
Yeah. And that was a rare opportunity. It's funny, they were so kind to me that this is pre-internet. And so my girlfriend at the time, wife now, she was at a race and she was wearing Birkenstocks. And they got so upset that she wasn't decked out in full Adidas gear that they sent a bunch of stuff in the mail. And then they said, when your girlfriend shows up, we don't need her in Birkenstocks. We don't need her in a Nike top. We need her decked out in Adidas stuff, and don't do that to us. And I'm like, they're aggressively telling me just to order a bunch of Adidas gear for her. And it was just the nicest thing ever. And it was a really good experience.
And they sent you some gear, right?
Oh, they sent gear nonstop. The boxes used to say hot from Hebron, and I think that was Hebron, Kentucky. But you pre-internet, you would just call an 800 number and you say, I need sweats, I need cold running gear, and they'd send you 4 or 5 boxes.
Wow.
And it was always a surprise of what you were getting. It was always a lot of pre-production stuff that wasn't available to the public, and you just it was like Christmas every time you called them. And it was tough to call them because I'm like, I feel like I'm taking advantage of them, but they'd send boxes out nonstop. It was fabulous. Really cool. Yeah. It was a great opportunity.
How long did you do that?
For 3.5 years, and then I went back to school, and they continued to do the program like that, and then they did a regional program, but they were just a great company to work for, and it was kind of the pinnacle of my career to be able to be a somewhat professional runner. Didn't pay, but there were a lot of incentives. If you did well at races, they would give you a bonus check.
Yeah. No, I mean, when you're doing something you love anyway,
it's awesome.
If you get paid anything,
that's awesome.
Yeah. Like that's really cool.
Well, I mean, did you get free trips?
Free travel. You would just say, one of the guys I trained with consistently, Cozy, he's like, I'm going to take my wife to Cancun, and he'd go down, do a bunch of races in Mexico, and you just send in a receipt. I mean, it was just amazing time. That'd
be pretty good right there.
You did that for 3 years.
Yeah, for 3 years, and great company. And like I said at the time too, I did a lot of training with Todd Williams, and he was my running idol at the time. And you get to help your running idol get faster. And on top of that, you got a lot of indirect coaching because Todd Williams is really good with motivation and people. And so, I mean, who wouldn't want to help Michael Jordan get faster?
Right. I'm gonna have to figure out who this Todd Williams guy is because I'm not sure.
What year was that?
I ran at UT 92 to 96, and then I ran for Adidas 96 to 99, and then went to graduate school after that.
Do you know if you had a guy on your team called Scrimsher?
Yeah.
That was my track coach.
Really?
He ran hurdles?
Yeah.
He came from William Blunt.
What a small world. I didn't know that.
That was my track coach for all 3 years I ran at school.
I think he's a little bit younger than me, but I remember him.
Yeah.
Oh, what a small world.
Yeah.
Which Scrimsher was that?
Coach Scrimsher. He's not the coach no more at Sequoia. He is, I think, the assistant principal at the middle school.
Okay, I know who he is. He was actually my, when he first moved to Tennessee, he was at Greenback, he was just fill-in teacher.
Yep.
He was a substitute. And then I think he moved there. But he was Callie's middle school teacher.
Yeah, he was I never had him in school, but he was my cross-country, or my track coach from sophomore year to my senior year. And then I think he was like Hawasse's cross-country coach.
Yeah.
And then he did that for a few more years, and then I think he got out of the coaching.
Oh, wow. It's amazing y'all grew up out here, but your accents are so neutral for the most part.
Mine?
Both of yours. Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I've heard that it's funny. There seems to be...
He's a
as soon as I say this, I will
singer.
get text. Everybody says I'm the Matthew McConaughey of Monroe County. So
that sounds like it.
All right, let's say, all right.
And apparently I say that every time we start the podcast.
He's like, all right.
So I just.
Yeah.
But let's talking for just a minute on that. Did you continue going to school while you were running with Adidas?
So I kind of quit running. I think the program I went to was so arduous that I didn't think I'd be able to do anything with that program. So I quit with Adidas, and then the program was also tough enough that I found I needed that outlet back. I would go to clinical, and just under the pressure cooker all the time. And so I said reluctantly, I need this outlet back. I'm gonna start running again. And I've done that 4 or 5 times in my life where I'm like, I'm done running, I'm gonna quit. And then quickly realized that without that outlet, I'm not a nice person.
You're not you.
No,
Yeah.
no,
I get it.
I start fights, I escalate fights, I'm not stable. And so I've kind of come to realize like I'm gonna need this outlet for the rest of my life. Even on those days I don't want it and those times I don't want it, I still need it.
Mhm.
You know, it's just a great stabilizer for me. And my wife works in mental health, and even she talks all the time about the benefits people would get about just any kind of activity, just even 3 or 4 times a week. It's just such a stabilizer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it becomes a way for, it's like you said, it's an outlet.
Yep.
It's a way for you to think, to meditate, whatever you want to call it. Like it is your time to work through whatever's going on. And also it's the time just to like let everything go.
Yeah.
Depending on what kind of mood you're in, and I mean, if you're in an effort mood, you just go out and run, you pick up some music and you have fun. Sometimes I run with nothing and just, there's no telling where my brain goes, but that's good for me, you know, and I totally get that. Like if I quit running, I'm same. I'm irritable. I'm not me. I'm short. I'm snappy. I feel stressed.
Yeah.
Like it's just become who I was, which is very interesting considering I started running so late in life.
Yeah.
So I completely see.
It's funny. I had a random thought on the drive over here, and this is counterintuitive, but my freshman year of college, I had a long distance girlfriend that cheated on me, and I found out at the end of my freshman year. And I wonder if that hadn't happened, if I wouldn't have had that negative energy and that angst and that just awful drive that would eventually propel me to greater success. And I'm like, it looks like a negative on the face of it, but at the same time, I had to channel that rage. And what if that event really set me up for success? Which sounds awful, that this one thing that is really just an awful, brutal thing that was painful. But at the same time, what if a lot of my life was channeled through this success because of the rage I had that was just absolute fuel for running,
there's always like that. I love this because it's so fun to hear when you get down into like the full discussion of like why people run or how they come about running. Most people know at this point if they listen to the podcast, I started running because I was going through a really bad divorce. Yeah. Really bad divorce. And, it was just at the time, every divorce is bad, you think it's the worst.
It's catastrophic. It really is.
Yeah. And you have to figure out a way to deal with it. But at the same time, like you're talking, like if that would not have happened, what would be different? Yeah. It's always interesting to think about that one thing. Yeah. That one thing that happened. What if it didn't happen? Like, where would I be now? Just that one thing. And
when at face value, this thing is a massive negative. There's nothing positive coming out of it, but maybe perspective and maybe what you can make out of it changes that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, we've got I know some people that are like going through, not really divorces, but just bad separations in relationships and, struggling really bad with it. But at the end of the day, and I've had my fair share of those, obviously, 2 divorces.
It's tough. It's very tough.
At the very end of it, though, if you handle it right and you handle it in a good way and you're still kind to people, somehow you always seem to come out just a little better.
And that I see that consistently. And you got to get through that rough patch first. But then when you get to that rough patch, there are better things out there. You just got to get there to it. And sometimes you need your buddies to help you. Sometimes you need circumstances. Sometimes you just need to suffer through it. I've got a lot of friends now. I'm 50, and I cannot imagine starting over. But I've got a lot of friends now that have gone through the divorce. Now they've got these younger wives that want kids. I cannot imagine starting over and having kids right now. Mm-mm. Both my boys are in college, and I love that they're in college, and this is a growth part of their life and everything else. But I can't imagine changing diapers and waking up at 2 a.m. tonight.
Me neither. I can now, but I know Matt he's still like,
it's tough.
Button still in a diaper? Or is he out now? He's out, right?
He is potty trained except for when he sleeps.
Except for the rare explosion.
Well, at night time we put him in his training pull-ups at night because when he sleeps he still pees. But
He
during
is
the day,
cutest little boy.
during
How
the
old is
day,
he?
he's 3.
Oh, wow.
So I had a 3 and a 6-year-old. She's about to be 7 in February.
3 and up is a good age. I didn't do well with 0 to 3. I told my wife, if you could just incubate them from 0 to 3, it would be fine. Just
I tried to get my wife to have them back to back so we could go ahead and get rid of the stage, but she didn't want to. So
it's the toughest part of your life, but it's also the best. You know?
Oh, I love them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're awesome.
So I want to pull us back in for just a minute because I want to make sure that we cover this. But so you quit school or you stopped school for a little while to do running with when you got out. I guess running with Adidas, you kind of paused for a little while. When did you decide to go back?
I moved back to Knoxville, and really when we had kids, I said I need some kind of outlet, and had no intention of running full time, this and that. I just needed to get out of the house and run here and there. And then as the boys got easier to manage, I just did more and more mileage. And then I found my friends were doing marathons, and I always had this elusive goal of chasing an Olympic trial qualifier. I never got it, but I liked chasing the goal. And then, eventually as I got older and that goal got further away, I'm like, well, this is just something I'm going to have to do. And, chased that for a while, intermittently gave up on running, but always came back to it. And then here recently I've said, well, I'm staying running. I'm going to do the hybrid stuff, and never imagined changing sports at 50. It's crazy.
Did you enjoy High Rocks?
I love it. I found everything I needed recently. I went through colon cancer and everything that entails, and then wanted to get back in shape. And then one of the surgeons I work with, John York, he's a fabulous guy, and he kept telling me I need to try DecaFit and High Rocks. And I eventually got out to one of the races. And the first race I did, my wife has come out to marathons and she's seen me here and there, but you can't really see much. But the DecaFit is an indoor event, and it's a standardized field. And she got to see me be underwater for 42 minutes. And she thought she was going to have to carry me out of there. I mean, you do ski erg, you do sled erg, you push a weighted sled, you do burpees, and I every single event I did, I got more underwater and couldn't catch my breath. And so she had legit medical concern I wasn't gonna make it out of the building. and the failure of doing well my first time kind of intrigued me. I said, I have a lot of deficits. I can improve on this. And then joined a gym in town. I joined Reach. And shortly after I joined, I talked to my best friends into joining, and Andy Jones, who's always turned up to 11, and he's the Labrador of friends. He's just...
You need a friend like that.
Oh, he is fabulous. And incidentally, he was also very around, and also was Baxa and his wife, Katie Baxa, when I was going through all my cancer stuff. And so I talked these guys into joining the gym, and then I go to work, and as soon as I get done with work, I go to the gym, and everything's better.
Yeah.
I'll jack my heart rate up, and I'll be short of breath and struggle pushing sleds and struggle with farmer's carry, but it solves all your problems.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that just a whole different outlet though?
It's massively different.
There's you can strength train, you can work out, or you can run, and they're slightly different in the stress relief.
Mm-hmm.
They both give you stress relief, but it's working out in a way that allows you to use aggression.
Yes.
Where you don't really get to use that in running. If you use it in running, you use it end up hurting yourself.
It's a very steep curve. I remember Jones and I have a great story about, we went to the gym and we were so proud of our progress, and we were pushing a sled, and as soon as we finished pushing the sled, one of the girls that works at the gym, Andrea, she said, "Hey, please don't unload that sled." And then she proceeded to put an extra 100 pounds on it. No. And then absolutely kept pushing a lot further than we were. And I'm like, this girl weighs 100 pounds and she's absolutely killing us. And we're doing our best, but we got a ways to go. And
well, you all did really well though, didn't you?
We've done well. I recently It's funny how things work out. I had a coworker, Sarah Beth, that covered a vacation day for me. And I said, hey, I've qualified in my third race of Decafit. I qualified for the world champs. And that was very validating. And then I was on the fence for a long time. And I talked to Sarah Beth. I said, you're off on this day. I'm thinking about doing this. And she goes, I don't need that vacation day. I'll give it to you. And so I broached it with my wife. I'm like, I think I'm going to go to the world champs. And went. I've been penalized for my age my entire life. Even when I went to college, I was still 17 because I have a September birthday and went early. And so I thought I got away from that. And then my birthday is September 17th. The qualifier for the different age group for Decafit September 15th. So I got moved into the 45 to 49 category when I was already 50 because that's when I was qualified. And 5 years when you're getting older is a big difference.
Yeah.
And so I finished 5th at the world champs. The 3 guys that led the world champs heat were absolutely just amazing. The other guy that was 4th beat me by a second. But
a second?
By a second. But
second.
Those burpees are tough, man. You finished with burpees.
I bet that one stung though, didn't it?
Well, I didn't even realize at the time because I was so out of gas. But if I would have been my proper category, I would have won overall. That
really stings.
Yeah. So this year I'll be in the proper category. But I think my life is one of longevity. Like I never won a state title. I never won an SEC title. I never won a national title. I was always in the hunt. But then all of a sudden when I turned 40, I went to USA Track and Field Masters meet. I couldn't get the day off to do the 3K or the 5K, which would have been a much better fit for me. And so I told Ethan Coffey, I said, I'm going to do the mile. And he was perplexed. He goes, okay. And we've been running together.
I can see Ethan's face right now. Sure see it.
It was not reassuring.
Yeah.
And so I said, I can't get Friday off, so I'm gonna leave Friday evening, and we'll go out Saturday. I'll run the mile. And so I go out there, and there's a guy, Mark Williams, in the race, and I remember seeing him on the starting line as we were going to get ready for the race. I go, I know you ran like 151 for the half last year. He's like, oh, that was kind of a slow time. I've actually run faster on a relay, and I recently ran like 49 seconds for the quarter. And I was like, Mark's got some wheels. And so the race starts, and this is one of the few races I took my wife and kids with me. It was in North Carolina, and with 600 to go, I told Ethan, I said, the only way I'm beating someone that fast is if 600 to go, I just emptied the tank. And so 600 to go, I took the lead and went. And Mark Williams with 200 to go was on my shoulder, but I had gone early enough that I kind of burned him off. And that was my first national title when I was 40. And it was in the mile, which wasn't my race, but it was logistically the only race I could get to. And my wife and kids got to see me win a national title at 40. I had been trying all those years. At junior nationals, when I was a freshman in college, I was second in the junior nationals. And finally, 20-something years later, I finally got a national title.
Wow. So you're 40. Were you in treatment?
I wasn't at the time. So the story about my cancer was, I started having a lot of gut issues and a lot of bleeding. And so I attributed that to fried food or alcohol or that hard workout I did or the ibuprofen I took after the workout. And so luckily I'm in the medical field, and I told my wife, I said, I think I'm going to get a scope done. I'm having a lot of issues. She was in graduate school at the time, and I really didn't want to burden her with an extra responsibility. And so I said, I think I've got ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, which are both lifelong, big time issues. It's awful. And so I surmised, I'm like, I don't want this, but I think that's what's going on. And so I went and got scoped, and I had my friend, Dr. Sarba, take care of me. And there's so many benefits when you're in the medical field of asking your friends to take care of you. I mean, it's just gives you a golden ticket to really get seen quickly. Mm-hmm. And I got taken care of. One of my poor coworkers took care of me, and I think it ruined her for a little while because she wasn't expecting cancer and I wasn't. And so when I woke up, my wife was telling me they're taking me for a CT scan, and I couldn't understand why. And they'd found just a bunch of cancer, so they took me, did that. Andy Jones, it was the first day of school for the boys, and Andy Jones had never met my kids. I said, "Here's my address. Take my kids to school." But what a great guy, because he's charismatic enough to show up at my door. He took my kids to school, and
I'm not here to steal you, kids.
So he took my kids to school since we had unexpected issues. I mean, I would have made contingency plans if I would have known. Get that
That's
taken
the
care
last thing you ever think.
No, I thought ulcer colitis or Crohn's, and I was prepared for that. And so that became this treatment where I had 25 rounds of chemo. I had a surgery, a colostomy for 12 weeks, another surgery reversed that, and then 12 rounds of chemo, and then all the stuff in between. And it's weird. When you have cancer, they make your appointments for you. I've never been involved with anything. They're like, you'll be here next Wednesday at 4. They don't ask if that's going to be an issue. They're next week at 4, you'll be here. And so my coworkers worked around me. My medical group worked around me. Everyone was so fabulous. And everyone that was taking care of me, ironically, I had taken care of them in some context or the other. And so, I got through that. I think it was substantially hard on my family. Like, I'd rather have cancer myself than be the spouse of someone going through that. And it was brutal on my wife. It was really tough on my kids. And I probably should have done better at handling the magnitude of what it would take on them toll-wise. And I'm a little more robotic than I need to be. I didn't have the articulation or the emotions to reassure them enough. And I'm sure they were greatly worried,
Yeah. I mean, not that that's an excuse, but some guys are just really hard at expressing emotions. Like
that's me.
And that's the thing. It's like, for your kids, you want to be tough, and you don't want to show that side of you. And that's really hard to do. And then the hard problem with that, though, is when you start doing that, it's hard to turn it off ever, even with your spouse or your significant other. And that's just something that, unfortunately, you build over time because you want to show that you're the strong guy or you're the strong person. But turning it off is a really hard thing to do.
It's tough being vulnerable. And especially with me, my MO is I'm never going to whine. I'm never going to show an emotion. I'm going to be robotic about it. And that's fine for 90% of your life. But when your wife has worries and your kids have worries, I think you need to be vulnerable and more open. And I easily could have done a lot of that better,
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the good news is you're still here.
And
you can fix all of that.
The good news, and this is going to sound syrupy and probably unbelievable, but none of the physical stuff was that bad. It was extra errands, extra tasks, extra dates on the calendar, but none of it was really that bad. And I think part of it was we live in discomfort. We're fine with a little bit of stuff here and there. And so none of it was bad physically. It was just the toll it took on my family. And then, a little bit of uncertainty for a while, but it really doesn't mirror what Mary's been through or what other friends have been through. And, I've had other friends, it was my job. I see a lot of people on the worst day of their life. They'll get a cancer diagnosis 2 weeks, and then they're having surgery, and then they're trying to figure out their life. And I take care of them when they're vulnerable and they're upset. And here I've been given a golden ticket that I've been inconvenienced, but everything's fine for me.
Yeah, but you still had to deal with, I know you're comparing yourself to like Mary and others, but you still had the same stress. You still had the I have cancer stress to deal with. And
I think I did, but I compartmentalized it so well that it was just another errand.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that was probably a problem with some of my friends and my family is that I worry about surviving this, because if you look at the numbers, I'm gonna survive it. I just got to get through this, and this is just another task. And
was this the same time that you stopped for a week to go run a relay?
Yeah, and that was important to me. It's funny because
What I want to like pause real quick. I love that you say that it's important to you, because one of the things that Mary talks about, and she talked about it on her podcast on here, that was one thing that made her feel normal during all of her treatment, even if it was just a mile a day. And if that was all she could do, she would go walk it.
Yeah,
because it made her feel like
a Duke. I remember that.
So
I
totally understand what you're saying, because I've heard it from her. Like, you need to still be able to feel like you're a normal human being and do the things you need to do for your stress out.
Yeah, and it was fabulous. And I'm very grateful my wife supported me for all these crazy ideas. And we were going to do the Keys relay with a guys team, a mixed team, and a girls team. And all the people out there were people that I loved and respected and looked up to. And so I was like, of course I'm going to do this. And we went out there. I have a picture of the gate number that we were flying through Atlanta. The gate number through Atlanta to go to the Keys was B9. And so I'm like, oh, B9. That's the perfect gate number. And so I got a great picture of it. And then me and Andy Baxa opened up the bar. They had the seats up on the bar, and the lady's like, "We can't start serving until the seats are down." We're like, "Well, we're gonna help you open. We're gonna celebrate a little bit today." And so went out there and ran the Keys, and I'm just rich with really good friends. And if I'm honest, there's a lack of reciprocation in some respects for me, because so many people invested in me and been so good to me. And I feel like I haven't been able to, on the front end or the back end, to return that investment. It's just amazing how good people can be to you. And there's some people I'm going to be indebted to for life, and I'll never be able to articulate the difference they made. I'll never be able to tell them how much it meant to me. I think they know, but it's a net loss for me in terms of the return. I'll never be able to return how much people have given me.
Well, you say that though, but at some point you've done something for them, or just being there for them has offset that. Because if they care that much to be there for you, then they honestly respect you somehow. You've done something that you don't realize that you've done, because people truly care for you if they're going to do that.
Well, I agree with it. And I think that's part of my guilt, is I keep a lot of people at arm's distance. I've got a lot of acquaintances, and I've got people that have been so good to me that I have new rules post-cancer now. Like, if anyone asks me to go for a drink, if I have that afternoon off, I'll go for a drink. And I think that just builds bridges. It's just giving me a perspective. It was the first time in my life that I've allowed myself to be a bit vulnerable and to accept help. I've got a coworker, Sarah Beth, that's been through breast cancer, and she has been my coach for this. And it's tough for me, that's always kind of at the pinnacle and kind of always doing well, to say, I need someone to walk me through this. And she's been perfect for that. And you really need someone that's been through the experience to say, hey, I'm going to be your shepherd. I'm going to tell you what's going on. And poor Sarah Beth, this is gross, but you worry about finances. And so I saw Sarah Beth in the cafeteria after my diagnosis. I said, how much is this going to cost the family? How much is this going to hurt the checkbook? And she kind of broke down. And then ever since then, she's been my shepherd to get through this. And she's good friends with my wife. And it's funny the people you meet and make friends with when you don't expect to, Yeah.
Well, I'm a very big believer in this, and that is that people come into your life when they're needed to be there.
Yeah.
They may not always be there with you, but they were there for the right amount of time when you needed them. And you don't always have the same friends through your entire life.
Yeah.
You don't have the same people in your entire life, but without those people there for those certain milestones or there's certain times, you may not be who you are.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of like they come in, they're a part of your life. They help you get through something. They were meant to be there.
Yeah.
But I hope you do realize that, like, the people that stepped up and helped you, they helped you because you helped them.
I agree.
And like, that's the thing. Don't ever undersell yourself like that. Because I hate to hear you say that. Like,
well, it's puzzling to me because even some people I maltreated that I wasn't close with and I wasn't really kind with, that they stepped up, and that's hard when you're like, so and so's really helped me out, and I could have been better than them, and it's just an amazing time of humanity when you learn to accept help from people, and at some points a lot of that happened when we were probably the most polarized we could be as a country, and all of a sudden people with different beliefs and different systems were all of a sudden just jumping at the chance to bring me dinner and feed my kids and feed my wife, and it was just probably the most humane experience I've ever had.
Yeah.
I would imagine that's very humbling.
It was tough at first, and Sarah Beth would say, you're going to have to learn how to accept help. You're going to have to learn how to just be vulnerable. And that's not easy for a person that's had armor all their life. Like I'm like most guys, I don't want any emotion. My family gave me a hard time. My oldest turned 21 the other night. And, I said, sometimes I want to eat and sometimes I want to talk, but I don't want to talk and eat. I just don't, I just like that bit of being emotionless and doing tasks, and you can't do that when you got a family though. You can't be emotionless. And
No.
So, but, because you're like truly always, as much as we all realize this at this point, but like your kids are always watching you.
Yeah.
And if you become a robot and you shut down, you're not helping them at all develop into the person that they need to be.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, you want to be open, you want to be vulnerable because you want your kids to know that that's okay, that they can bring stuff to you.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard for you as a father to even think about, like, being vulnerable, but man, it does so much.
It is. And it's still something I'm working with.
I think we all are always working with that. Like that's something we all struggle with. Being vulnerable. No one wants to ever feel vulnerable.
People equate vulnerable with weak, and it's not necessarily weak.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Some of the most vulnerable people that I've met are by far the strongest.
Yeah.
And I admire that.
You kind of learn that late in life,
Unfortunately, you do.
Yeah.
But so, at what point how far were you in treatment when you're like, hold up, we're going to run a relay?
I think I think I was on chemo treatment number 9 of 12, and I had just had my colostomy reversed in February 17th of that year, and the relay was like in May, so 9 weeks earlier I had my colostomy reversed. It was still healing up slowly, and so they said, do you want to do this? I was like, of course. And but I answered before I even thought objectively if it was possible. But it was really the best thing for me. The bad thing about me is I had so many gut issues. As soon as we finished the race, I probably stayed locked in my hotel room for 8 hours just with massive gut issues. And Jonesy sent me a text. He's like, you're all right? I'm like, I'm just, paying the penalty right now. But, I'll get out to the beach when I get a chance. But, you really start to value what it is to get a drink with a friend and just be vulnerable and just share experiences. And, there's power in that. I think a lot of guys, and probably women in particular, you can get a drink or two with someone and you either build bridges or you talk about your problems or both,
Yeah, agreed.
And everyone's got problems. Even the most stoic people, they've got the same problems,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. We're, in a way, we're all a little crazy. We all have problems. So
yeah.
It's, and anybody that thinks that they don't, it's not real.
Yeah.
We're only human.
Yeah.
And we're all just doing the best we can every day.
Sure.
But what did your doctors say when you went to them and said, I'm going to take a week off? I'm going to go to Florida and run this. Was it a 100-mile relay?
It was a 100-mile relay with, I can't remember how many people we had on the team, but, my share was, 6 people on the team, 100 miles. So I probably ran maybe 15 miles. They gave me
15 miles at like a what pace?
The first couple legs I was 5:45, and I slowed a little bit after that. But they probably gave me the charitable leg, and then luckily everyone that was helping out with my carry knew I was a bit of an anomaly, and I was a bit of a racehorse, and I was going to go do this even without the endorsements. So they made it easy on me, and they endorsed it with some stipulations, and it was very helpful. And even my wife, I think, thought I was a little crazy for going to run a relay and going to hang out on the beach and drink with my friends. But it was a bit of a celebration because I was almost done with everything at that point, So
yeah, and I would imagine that was hard, anyways, at the age of 40, like dealing with that, and then having your friends call you and say, "Hey, you want to do a relay?" was probably like a stress reliever in itself. Like, you just that 1 week of like, be myself for just a while.
Yeah, I was probably closer to 45 at the time, and luckily I had the lottery with my wife. She knows that I need my outlets, I need my niche, and she allows that. And a lot of people don't understand that. I think she, over the years, has just determined that I'm going to be a better husband and father if I have just give me 10%, 15% of my time just to do this.
Yeah.
And the rest of the time I'll be a much better husband and father if you just tolerate my wild friends and my wants. Yeah. I mean,
you bring up a really good point. Like, compromise goes a long way and stuff like that, because everybody has their thing. Some of us are crazy runners. We need our hour a day to go run or whatever, just we get a long run on Saturday or Sunday, but an hour a day to go run. And that seems like a lot, like you may take away from your family, but my goodness, for your mental health and for who you are, if you take that away, it's something that you don't really realize it until it's too late.
True.
That you've lost yourself.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so did you try to continue that the whole time that you were in chemo?
As much as I could. But then, the other thing about me is I've also been out of balance, where I've been so much about training and extraneous stuff that I probably wasn't the best husband or the best father. And so, bringing balance to the house is tough, because you want to do what you want to do, but you want to do it without penalty and without contempt. And that's a hard balance. And so I was able to really have some good conversations with my wife about all that, and with my coworkers and with my surgeon, with my GI doc. So I had good balance for all that stuff. And without it, I think I would have really struggled.
Yeah.
And I had some adventures with the colostomy. I went on a 7-mile run in Oak Ridge, and on the way back, I turned around early, but the whole group was going forward in Oak Ridge, and the adhesive failed on that ostomy. And so on the way home, I had a t-shirt that was just, when you have an ostomy, there's no control. Stuff just happens. And so on the way home, I just had a t-shirt pressed against me, and it might as well look like a gunshot, but it wasn't any of that stuff. It was just coming out. And, I had another night where I rolled over, and I'm like, what is warm and liquid pressed against me? I don't understand. And it was, my ostomy had popped, and
oh no.
And you can't go back to sleep, and you got to change a bed and change your clothes and shower and everything. And so, it was a bit of a learning curve. And I knew at some point I'd be able to get that reversed. A lot of people that go through what I went through, they either never get back to work, or they're never able to do physical activity. I just kind of hit the lottery with that stuff too,
Yeah.
So
do you think some of that was because you continued to be active and do the things you did?
I think that was a big help. And I think when you're under duress, you really need your outlet more than ever. And so even on days where I had fatigue and I had a lot of neuropathy, I'm like, I need to go on a 2-mile run. And when I come home, I'm probably going to be worse shape than I was when I started. But I need this. I need to put some music on. I need to just go out and get in the weather and get some sunshine and come back. And It's funny because the one responsibility you had to always go out for a run for every day becomes less of a responsibility and more of a want, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it was a struggle for me. I'm still not used to the fact that my anemia has become a problem. I used to run with a hematocrit of 48, but right now I've got a hematocrit of 40. And so that's a pretty substantial difference in your blood counts. And they're trying to fix that, but at the same time, my results aren't really reflecting that I'm anemic. So I think I'm making enough gains in the strength world to kind of offset that. But that might get better, it might not. But at the same time, it's not really a factor, which is surprising because for every 1 point difference in your hematocrit, it's usually a 3% gain in performance, plus or minus. And so if I've got a 8-fold difference in my blood counts, it should be a 24% reduction in performance, but it hasn't really reflected in the numbers. It doesn't make sense to me that if I'm that anemic, I should be running a lot slower than I am.
Do you take an iron supplement or anything to try to help offset any of that?
I've probably tried a dozen different iron supplements. If you look at my Amazon account, it's just littered with failed attempts. And the thing about anytime you have gut issues, you've had chemo, you've had radiation, you've had surgery, you've had another surgery, and then you introduce something that slows you down, and it's tough to deal with. And so I've tried a dozen different iron supplements. I've recently gotten IV iron, and I think that might help. Part of this is my issue because I never whine. Every time they go and ask me all the questions, I'm like, I'm fine. And so last time I'm like, I'm anemic. Can we do something about that? And they're like, oh, we can do all this for you. I was like, oh, I should have mentioned this earlier. And so I got an IV iron treatment. I'm gonna see if it works. I hope it does because I just can't tell. I just don't think I have the absorption for the pill type of iron.
Yeah.
And if I do have the absorption, then I have all the gut issues that come with it.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'll just get an IV iron. There's a company called Monoferric, and I'm not one to typically mention corporate companies, but they've given me a pretty substantial, what they call a card on getting treatment, and they're going to cover my treatment for quite a while, even if my insurance doesn't cover it. That's kind of a big deal. So Monoferric came through, and in Tennessee Cancer, I think, came through and getting that card for me. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So hopefully it helps.
I got the complete opposite problem.
Really?
I have to donate blood like every 4 to 5 months.
We should be friends.
I always pray that it doesn't happen before a race.
That is wild. What is that?
My hematocrit, I have a lot of iron. Iron runs high in my family.
Oh, wow.
So I have to donate every so often because it gets so high. So my grandfather actually had a heart attack.
Because of iron?
He was like 50 or 51 because his iron levels were so high.
Oh, wow.
And my great-grandfather died from it.
Jeez.
And they didn't realize what he had died from until my grandfather had a heart attack, and then they got to realize it.
You get a lot of liver and kidney problems with it, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I have to watch. I have to donate blood every so often, especially if it gets so high. But, I actually had to donate before that marathon we were talking about.
Oh,
so
wow.
I donated blood, then got COVID and strep. So it was like,
man.
Is that the race you donated right before?
Yeah.
No, you did that a couple years ago.
Yeah. But that's the thing is I don't tell a lot of people. I guess I just told everybody. But, I have to donate a couple times a year.
Yeah. And, I can tell you, especially working for an anesthesia group, it's a gift. I mean, we get blood, and it's almost always an emergency situation, and we're giving it just as quick as we can, and it's the life-saving measure we can do, especially packed red blood cells, which is probably what they break down your blood into. And I mean, it's a massive lifesaver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll just like every now and then I can check me like, oh, I can't remember what they'll say, your hematocrit's like 52, you're gonna have to donate.
Wow.
I'm like, okay.
What a problem to have.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. It's great for running, if I understand, but it's not when I have to donate. So it's funny. But yeah, so I hope that like you being right on that border of being anemic, that doesn't help you a lot with the running and the fatigue feeling.
I think it probably would be an issue if I was just running, but I'm not sure what factor is making it a non-issue, but I'm not really been bad
it hasn't?
factor.
Well, that's great.
Which is amazing to me because even when I went with my wife in a pharmacology class, they said every single percentage point on your hematocrit is a 3% gain in performance. And so 8% differential is 24% performance. That's a big.
And I do believe the strength training will help you.
I think so too.
That's a major difference.
Well, it's a big deficit, and I can only improve in so many different areas. And it's amazing. The gym I go to, I'm at Reach out in Knoxville, and the gym culture is impeccable. Like every single person there can see that all of this is new to me, and they will stop their workout and they'll come over and they'll help me out. And I had been there for months, and there's no better way to say this that I'm the run to the gym. I just finished 5th at the world champs. That's probably our worst result. Everyone else is winning their age groups at world champs, and there's banners everywhere, and there's people that are just absolutely killing it. And I'm like, man, I'm trying to catch up to them, and we've just got some incredibly successful people, but they are so humble and helpful that you forget how successful they are until you see the banners on the walls. Like, oh wow, you're a really big deal. You've been helping me for 3 months, and I didn't know you were world champ.
See, that is a gift.
Yes.
That's truly a gift, because that's the people in the long run that help you to be the best that you can be.
Yeah.
I love that. The people that don't talk about what they've done or the things they've accomplished, and they're just kind and they want to help you.
Yeah.
It's people I love. I mean, that's truly where it's at, because that gives you that whole running community feeling.
Yes.
That's the whole point. We're drawn to running is the community. Yeah.
The owner of that gym, Taylor Haney, he owns Reach. He's been so fabulous. And then there's a couple of distance runners, Jen Weston and Mel Barong, and we went to a race in Chicago, tens of thousands of people out there, and Mel and Jen went 1-2 overall for the women. And I'm like, man, these two girls that I just see training all the time, they 1-2 at this massive meet.
Oh wow.
I mean, just, and I'm like, and they're runners that have converted to this hybrid sport. I'm like, well, they're kind of setting the template,
Yeah, me and Mary have talked about maybe wanting to try high rocks.
It's a completely different animal, and it's weird because they've got the music turned up to 11, and it's just weird because you run and you ski erg, and you run and sled push, you run and sled pull, you run, and then you do 80 meters of burpee broad jumps, which really spikes your heart rate. Run another K, row, run, farmer's carry, run, weighted lunge, run, and wall ball. And it's 100 wall balls with 14 or 20 depending on your weight category. And my wife went to the first one of those that I've done in Toronto, and Jonesy sent her a text during the middle of the race, and she was like, how's Stewart doing? And she just said, struggling. She wasn't exaggerating. It was like a lot of things, it's tough when you really max out the RPMs for longer than you can, and you empty the tank, and people can cheer you on all they want, but when your tank's empty and you still have a lot of work to do, it's a tough spot to be in,
Yeah, but at the same time, the most important thing that you can ever do is show up and try.
Yeah.
And like that speaks volumes. Like, sometimes it really, especially for like you who's been successful at running, like, you've been very successful.
Yeah.
To just start a whole new sport at the age of 50 and be like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to give it a shot. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't like that uncomfortable feeling, so they won't even show up at the start line to give it a shot. And
it's been a learning curve for me because I don't like being unsuccessful. But then I'm like, well, I'm not really unsuccessful if I was 5th at Decker Fit World Champs, and then I'm trying to qualify for the High Rocks World Champs. But I'm getting ready to do a race in Vegas coming up, and I was signed up for the pro weights, but the pro weights are absolutely brutal. I've done my best to get ready, but the pro sled push is 450 pounds. The pull is 350. The weighted lunges are 30 kilograms on your shoulders for 100 meters. The farmers carry 70 in each hand for 100 meters, 200 meters. And then the wall ball is 20 pounds, 100 times with a full squat. And me and Jonesy and Baxter do all this workout in the gym, and I'm probably 70% of the way there. But you get into a race and you're 70% prepared. That's just a bad recipe.
Yeah.
So I'm going back to the open division for this one. We're doing another one in April in Atlanta, and the goal is to do the pro division and try to go to qualifier there.
I think that's smart to go back to the open for another time or two at least.
I appreciate that, because I've struggled with it, because I'm like, I've signed up for the pro and I'm gonna do it, and you do everything you can, but at the same time, like Jones and I just had a workout at the gym today, and we dialed back some of the weights, and I'm like, I'm kind of glad I moved down a division.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's the learning and the growing to get to that point. And like, it's okay to humble yourself. Like, start over. It's fine.
Yeah.
And we unfortunately, some of us can't really do that, without like, we feel like we're just like, oh, I should be doing the pro version.
Yeah.
It's not the case. Like, you want to learn how to do it and do it well, then move forward with that. So I think you're doing it the smart way.
I'm trying, and I appreciate the reassurance, because ambition sometimes is a ruiner. You can be too ambitious, and it's a tough flight home when you've gone out overly ambitious, and
or the worst case, you injure yourself.
Yeah,
because you're doing weight that you should not be doing.
Yeah. And I think that probably would have happened. And so I talked to Taylor today, and I talked to Jonesy and Baxter this week, and I'm like, I'm going to move down a division, and there's a lot of good reassurance there. That's a good thing, having coaches in your life to say, hey, I'm thinking about this, and you probably get good feedback if you're being honest with them,
Yeah.
All right, Stu, let's talk for just a second. I want to talk a little bit about like your running career.
Yeah.
Just so everybody can see like your transition. So you go to college, you graduate school, you run for Adidas for a little while. When did you really start? You obviously moved away from Knoxville, come back. Did you grow up in Knoxville, by the way?
I went to high school in Southern California for a while, and that incidentally very close to where those wildflowers are. Like where those wildflowers are right now, I used to do a lot of training runs. It's tough to see because it was where I grew up. They've got these. That's one of the few places in the U.S. where you have the beach, and then you cross PCH, which is Highway 1, which is what I took to my high school. And then you get into these hills, and you do a lot of climbing on these dry dirt hills. And even when I traveled out there most recently, everything's dry, and it's you worry about it. But that's where I grew up, right there, and all that stuff is burned down. And I've got a soft spot for people that have just lost everything. And some of those people, a fair amount, have been uninsured, which is awful. I can't imagine.
Me and Mary were watching a video the other day, and it's horrific to see all the houses. Just burning.
Malibu is, Pacific Palisades is here, Malibu is here, and then Oxnard is here. Point Magoo was the Navy base that was right next to Oxnard, and it's right on the border of that. It's funny, all these car commercials always show, if next time you look at a car commercial, you'll see a car on the left is the beach, on the right is the mountains, and then you'll see a big rock on the left-hand side. That's called Magoo Rock, and we lived at Point Magoo. And so every time my poor wife is watching a car commercial with me, I'm like, that's where I grew up, right there, Magoo Rock. Every single car commercial uses that landscape of where I grew up for a car commercial.
So how did you end up in Knoxville at UT?
So my mom kind of made that happen, and I took a book scholarship to come out to UT. I had lived in Virginia for 3 years, Spain for 3 years. Spain was a great place to live for us. Southern California, Northern California, Southern California, kind of vice versa. And then UT, my dad's last rotation was going to be either Puerto Rico, Guam, or Hawaii. But by that point, he had 20 years in, and he decided it was a good time to retire.
You didn't try to talk him into going to Hawaii?
It's funny. It sounds fabulous. Puerto Rico, Guam, and Hawaii all have high schools that are really abrasive for U.S. students. They do not like domestic U.S. military kids at all. It was always somewhat of a mixed adventure going to new schools all the time as it was. They did not want you there. And like I said, I got used to getting into a fight about once a week growing up. And I think that probably adventure would have probably continued going to a very hostile school, you know. It's funny. My dad eventually bought the house that my mom grew up in outside of Memphis. And that was able to get us in-state tuition at UT. We probably paid $60,000 for that house. And that house probably paid that at least in tuition while my brother and I toiled until we got increased scholarships. And he still lives in that house. And amazingly enough, my dad's had a huge back surgery years ago. He had schwannoma, which is kind of a overgrowth of the myelin sheath that kind of insulates nerves. So he's got substantial leg issues. He can maybe walk 50 feet before having a lot of fatigue in that leg, and he's got a lot of foot drop and everything else. Probably at least 10 years since he's had that surgery. Never heard him complain once. I think anyone else would have had complaints and this and that, but at the time, he's like, my house is paid off, my truck is paid off. Yeah. I'm not going to go for disability. I'm just going to quit. I have no complaints. And it's amazing to me, the example that my dad is, that I think anyone else in his situation might have some choice words, but he's like, oh, this is fine. I'm happy. So, yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And, I have long-term concerns because he's still got a lot of balance issues and everything else because that leg just gives out on him. But he's got a place out in the Memphis area with some land and everything else, and he's fine. He's also this mechanic. He can fix anything. Yeah.
That's a pretty cool trait.
Yeah. I've got a 2 or 3 year streak of not taking any cars to the dealership. I've also got a 71 Chevy Nova that was his and my brother and I have shared, and I had to drop it off the dealership for a wiring issue years ago. He was so masculine disappointed in me that I had to take it to a dealership. This car that hasn't seen the dealership in 40 years, I had to take it to a dealership.
We got to do, Dad.
Yeah. And I also had the transmission rebuilt. It's amazing what, someone that knows how to work a wrench and some videos can make anything run forever. It's amazing.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's an amazing trait.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your mom is the reason you ended up in Knoxville.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's funny. I'm embarrassed to say this now, but when I came out, I was geographically smug. I thought I was coming from a better place to a lower place, and looked down on Knoxville, and that went away pretty quick when I found Knoxville had everything I wanted, but not any of the undesirable effects. When I let that geographic smugness go away, I'm like, man, the people here are fabulous. The videos on my phone, every time I fly back into Knoxville, I'm taking videos of the foothills and the greenery, and it's just a gorgeous place. It's easy to live here. It's easy to be happy here. And even when I went to graduate school in North Carolina, my wife really said, I know you got a contract to stay in North Carolina, but I really want to go back to Knoxville. And we're so happy out here.
So where is your wife?
She's from North Georgia. And she's got a big family that's still in North Georgia. They're north of Atlanta. We still go down there. It's Ball Ground, Canton, Jasper, that area. Mm-hmm. I want to go down to Blue Ridge one time just to see what that's about. But she's got a great family, and we're away from my family. We're away from her family, which is a little bit tough. But we love living in Knoxville. And she's a mental health nurse practitioner, which is not an easy job, but she's fabulous at it. Yeah. Her job, I can go to my job, and I'm fine, and nothing bothers me. But I think she sees a lot of issues at her job, and she takes a lot of stuff home with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine how hard that is.
Yeah. It's brutal.
Well, so you moved to Knoxville, obviously, and you fell in love with it. And you've obviously ran a lot of races around Knoxville, because as I go through your, Athlinks here, I don't know if you've ever been on Athlinks, but I can see a lot of
impressive site. Yeah.
But you've ran a lot of races, and I've got Ultra Sign Up pulled up on here too, and you at one point you kind of toyed in the 50K distance, which you have a really impressive PKs at the Pistol Ultra here in Alcoa, Tennessee. But both races you finished second place overall. Slightly different times, but not much different overall. But you did shave quite a bit of time off from your first attempt to your second, with your fastest being 3 hours and 11 minutes.
Yeah.
That's a pretty fast 50K.
It's my marathon time.
I mean, that's really impressive. And I know you say that that was in 2015, so that wasn't too long ago.
No.
But I know that you kind of toyed with the ultras. You've not, 50K is probably your longest distance, right?
It's my longest distance so far, yeah.
What, I just wanted to ask you though, like, what do you think of all your races? Like, which one has been the most memorable?
I've had a couple of 5Ks and 10Ks that have been memorable, like my 5K at NCAA indoors. This is all pre-internet, but my 5K, we got the date wrong. I think they thought I was supposed to run on Friday, but it was a Thursday race, and so I did a pretty hard workout Tuesday. And so I went in pretty sore, but with a couple laps to go, I was right in the front, and I still regret to this day that if I would have been more aggressive, I might have won. But the guy that won that NCAA 5K that year, James Menon, his last 200 was like 26 seconds, and that is just brutal fast for a 5K runner.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of me is like, well, if I would have done this and that, I'm like, well, I think James Menon and all the guys in front of me would have still been bringing it. That was a good race. And then we also got the date wrong on my 10K PR.
Those are pretty important, Stu.
They are. But this is all pre-internet, so I couldn't verify anything. And so it's amazing to me that a lot of my PRs are pre-internet, which internet's been around forever, But we went out to Mount Sac, and Cozy and I went to In-N-Out Burger, because what else are you going to do when you go out to California for a race? And we went to In-N-Out Burger, and then my coach is like, Stu, you race in 90 minutes. I was like, I race tomorrow. And he goes, we got it wrong. You race tonight. And so I raced that night fresh off of In-N-Out Burger, and still was the fastest American collegiate distance runner. And I think I would have probably broken 29 minutes for the 10K if I would have not had a cramp for the last half of the race. Like, even ambitious wise, I think I went out for the first 5K of that 10K in 14:25 and felt good, and then just kind of paid the price for, fatty hamburger sitting on my gut the second half. Those are memorable. And then winning 3 Knoxville marathons has been memorable. I won 2 outright, and then the third, I call myself winner because the guy that won, he had a positive drug test in Mexico 2 or 3 weeks before. He didn't need testosterone and estrogen to beat me, but he was on everything. So one of these days we might correct that, but I think he's since passed in a car wreck or something like that. But some of these racehorses don't need all that stuff. They're just fast on their own. I'm fascinated by a lot of these East African runners that come out to the States, and then they'll drive 12 hours for a race that pays $1,000. That's a lot of work ethic right there.
Well, I mean, to them, it's a job, though. It's a lot.
Absolutely.
$1,000 is a lot of money.
And the average wage for Kenya, I think, is like $400 a year. So if you can make 2.5 times your average salary and send it back home, that's a big deal. That's motivation that a lot of American runners will never find discomfort in. I'm not going to go to the well for that much money. I'm not going to drive 12 hours for $1,000.
Yeah, I spend that for a race.
It's amazing when you start spending on a race, just and then you start getting into hotels, and you're like, I just want to be comfortable, and and then I want to go out afterwards, and so that's this and that, and so
it's easy to do.
Oh, for sure, sure.
I mean, some of these 100-milers that we sign up for, 300 plus.
Yeah, I've been looking at the race.
And then you got to drive, and then if you get a hotel, then all the food that you get. And
yeah.
Then, on the way back, all the gas. I mean, you're spending easy $1,000 that weekend.
I would still argue it's less than some of these antipsychotics that a lot of people have to take. That, if it's not covered by your prescription, these stabilizers cost a lot more.
Yeah.
It's funny to me, though, to hear you say, like, pre-internet. We had a guy on here. You may know him, you may not, but his name's Rob Apple.
Uh-huh.
So Rob Apple is kind of like a legend in ultra running as far as he has the Guinness, or I should say Guinness. He has the world record for the most ultras ever ran.
Really?
And if you get on his ultra sign up, it's incredible.
Oh, that's fascinating.
But he has over 800. He's working on 900 now. Ultras.
Wow.
And this guy, I mean, he runs our races every year. Yep. He comes to all the local races. He lives in Tennessee.
Really?
Yeah. Long-haired. But he started running like, it's really so cool to, like, we had him on the podcast, and it just reminds me of you because you keep saying pre-internet and like going to the NCAA championship. But, I was so curious with him. I was like, how did you even register for a race back then?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he's like,
he's
it was crazy. He's like, for an ultra, we would have to like order these he was like, we'd go buy a magazine. We'd find the race in the magazine. We'd fill out the letter or the application. We'd mail it in. Then they'd mail us our ticket or our registration back. And then we were good. And he's like, there was no last second, call or anything like that. Sometimes you'd show up for the race and you just pay, and they would pay cash and they'd let you in.
It was like the cross country race with the sticks. If you finished first, they give you a stick that said first, and then they would match it to the time.
Really?
They were little tongue depressors, and you pass it to the person at the end. And say if you finished fourth in a big cross country race, you'd give them the fourth place tongue depressor that they would hand you, and then they'd match it to the time, and then they'd ask your name. Yeah.
So I could see, like, we're so spoiled now with data and access and immediate results. I could see, though, how it would be so easy to not for Saturday or Sunday because we all make mistakes.
It still brings back memory because I still remember I've never felt more like a clod than when me and Tony Cozy were out at the U.S. Cross Country Championships in Stanford. And these two Stanford girls were like, what's your email? And we had never heard about email. And Stanford's way ahead of UT in terms of this. We're like, we don't have one. They're like, it's usually your first initial and your last name at utk.edu. Like, we definitely don't have email. One of the girls I saw, I looked recently, I was looking at the TED Talks, and I saw Mona Choksi had a TED Talk. And I was like, that's the girl that ran for Stanford. She's now got a TED Talk, and I'm a regular person, but she's got a TED Talk, and I was like, that makes complete sense to me, And these two Stanford girls trying to tell these UT guys what an email address was. We didn't learn anything. They were so taken aback that we didn't know what email was.
And technology has advanced so much.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I was like, what's your Instagram?
Yeah. They thought we were completely joking. Like, they listened to them. What's their email? And they were like, well, we've never heard of that. We don't know what you're talking about.
I think it was me and Mary were talking the other day about how pagers are like still a thing. Like I guess, I don't know if it's doctors.
Yeah.
Like doctors still like have pagers because it's the most reliable.
It is reliable. It's funny. That's how my wife and I met our first date. Long story short, I was taking an advanced pharmacology class to pad my resume so I could get into CRNA school, so I could do anesthesia. And the first day of class, this never happened to me, but the professor said, I want everyone to introduce themselves, who's here and where do you work and what's going on. And so I stood up and I said, I'm Stewart Ellington. I work night shift at St. Mary's. I'm trying to get into CRNA school. Dr. Farr says, is that it? And I go, yeah. And he goes, that's not it. You're on the cover of Running Journal this month, and we're so flattered to have you. And no professor had ever known that I was a runner cold. Like, I didn't tell him anything. He's like, I can't believe you're here in the class and this and that. And so I was like, I can't believe this professor knows I'm a runner. And so the very next class, my future wife was sitting in front row, and she goes, hey, I work at Park West, but I take a lot of call. Can I get your number in case I get called into work? I was like, sure. And caller ID was brand new. And my brother got me a caller ID machine, and she had called me, didn't leave a message or anything. She was kind of timid. And I wrote her number down and then worked all semester to get a date. And so I finally get
Which paid off, by the way.
Which paid off. But I finally get a date. And during the date, she's on call, and her pager goes off. And so I was like, oh, well, you're a nurse on the heart team. Talk to the restaurant about calling them back and seeing what kind of emergency they got. And then she looked, it's fine. And I'm like, oh, well, you must have one of those fancy numeric coded pages that has messages. I've never seen one of those. So you must know it's not an issue. She goes, no. And I go, how can you be on call and not have to return that call? And then I'm like, I think this is an opt-out page, and she's not opting out. And sure enough, one of our mutual friends now, I love the guy. It was Joey, one of our mutual friends, but he had been told to text her or page her during dinner in case it was a bad date that she anticipated. And it wasn't a bad date. So she was like, no, it's nothing. And so we continued the date and everything was fine. And, you know, I had a bright yellow Turbo Supra at the time, and she...
Dude,
that's what I'm talking about.
That is amazing.
But she saw a Dodge Ram 2500 that I had rented while I was getting my car painted. So she thought I had this big Dodge 2500 farm truck. And so she like, where's your truck? I go, that's a rental I've had for 2 weeks. I've been getting this car painted. And she didn't want to go out with a sports car guy. She wanted a country rodeo farm boy. And I was like, so it was a
you won her over with Supra though.
It was bait and switch. That car was problems the entire time, but it was a great car. Yeah.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that's like a nostalgic car.
It was great, and it had a target top, and every time it rained, it would accumulate rain, and then it would all go down to that top corner. And if you're the passenger, it all came down in your lap because that's
perfect.
Yeah, she's like, so there was a towel up there. She'd have to hold the towel up until the car got tired of draining everything.
That's true love, dude.
Yeah, it was
the whole time.
And she made a Stewart Ellington priority list, and it was running, Supra, and then her. So she put herself third on the list. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you a little different question now. So that was your most memorable race.
Yeah.
What's been your hardest race?
I've had a lot of those. I've probably my first dozen marathons I bombed out. I was trying to run 220 for nothing, and so probably my first 10 to 12 marathons, I went with that goal of running 222, which is the Olympic trials qualifier. And when I wasn't, I went as far as I could before dropping out. So those were tough to swallow. Then anything else where I had high standards and I was way off those high standards, those were tough. Especially after I got out of college, I finished up in 96, and from 96 to 99, I didn't erode my standards. You know, it was all still sub 14 5K or nothing, sub 29 10K or nothing. And when I wasn't in those goals, it was kind of tough. And so then the recipe for that was always go home and train harder. And so I'd go home and train harder. And it's tough when you've got really lofty goals, and then you've got just fabulous teammates that can. I mean, Todd Williams was a 13:20, 27:31 guy, and you go back to him, you're like, I need to train harder. You know, and then being the only guy that worked a night shift full-time job, you know, I just kept trying to burn the wick a little harder to get more out of it. And even some of the doctors I work with were like, you're probably messing up your cortisol, you're probably messing up this, you're probably messing up that. And I don't want to hear any of it. I just wanted fast results, you know? Mm-hmm. So, and that was probably tougher for me because in my past, the recipe always worked. The harder you train, the more you get. And so I continued on that recipe, even though my lifestyle was not conducive to that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there's very few times where you actually peak.
Yeah.
At that point, you know, so I understand why you feel like that. Like, cause you always feel like you could do more, but sometimes,
yeah.
You start doing, you know, you're building a deficit, you know, and that's probably, I would hate to say it, but that's probably where you were at that point, right? Like
I think so too. Yeah. And, you know, it's funny because I still remember, I'll admit the names, but I still remember running a Cahoon's 10 miler. And I think I might've been close to breaking 50 minutes of that 10 miler. Me and Baxter were going back and forth. This relatively new runner told me I had peaked long ago in college. And I'm like, I'll peak when I say I peak. But I was so salty about it. You know, and then a couple years later, I went and ran 107 for the half and 223 for the marathon. So I got faster later, but I got faster with the longer stuff later. But I still remember having to bite my tongue, and I really wanted to be salty and abrasive and say, I'll peak when I say I'm going to peak. You know, I'm the same person. I'm just not training as much. And you know, that aggression probably helps you and hurts you a little bit.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you know, I mean, in all seriousness, like, you can't be good at what you do unless you have a little bit of that in you.
Yeah.
That's the honest truth. You need that. You need I have a little confidence in myself I'll do it when I say I'm going to do it. I will make this. If you don't have that, then I feel like in a way you kind of settle.
Sure.
That's the thing. It's like you need to have a little self-confidence to be able to do the things that you set out to do. And that's the thing. It's like every time someone says that they're going to do something that's a little bit beyond what's capable, we all think they're crazy till they do it. And if you don't have that in you, then you're never going to do it.
Well, I think that's where, and I'm going to be careful with my wording, because diplomatically, I think I garnered a lot of respect from a lot of people because they could see by my stride and my breathing pattern that I had less talent than a lot of people I was running against, but I was more willing to do more conditioning than everyone else. And I really enjoyed toiling in the pain when other people would break, when people are next to you and they're short of breath and everything else, and you just waiting for them to struggle and fall off the pace. And I got really good at that. I was a well-conditioned mule that was running with racehorses. And I'm not saying that in an arrogant way, but you could see some of the guys I was running with, I had no business running with them. And I think that's where I just got a lot of respect from a lot of people because they knew I didn't belong up there, but I just willed myself up there. And I think that's really was kind of a peak moment of my life where I recognized that people respected that. And you could tell when you're running against people, some of these guys have just fabulous strides and they're not short of breath, and I've got a short choppy stride and I am up there wheezing and hacking and people see that, and I think people relate to that because they know I've been willing to work to get up there with people that I have no business being with. And and I think that's where a lot of people have really been kind to me, is from seeing that kind of effort. And we've got a lot of people in town that also display that kind of effort. Like I show up at a race, and if Alan Horton's out there, you're not going to lose that guy. You're not going to outwill that guy because he's going to be in your back pocket right there. Ethan Coffey is another guy that, and I say this tactfully, I've had this conversation with him. He has this much talent, but he's produced this much results. And he's just a guy that will toil year after year after year and get big results. There's another guy that used to be in town, Patrick Gilday, modest talent, but he was a 1:03 half marathon runner just on determination. And I mean, that's amazing to me that a guy that has relatively modest talent can go just will himself into 1:03 half marathon shape. And that's amazing to me. And I think that's the appeal of the race, is it becomes just a contest of who's going to suffer more. It doesn't matter about talent or conditioning or anything else. It becomes a matter of like, I can out suffer you. And I think that's why I like some of these races, Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to be said. Talent is talent. Genetics is genetics. You can't change that. You're given what you're given, period. But there's a lot to be said about the amount of work and consistency you put into that.
Yeah.
Because we can all be way better than where we are. And, I know that you say you worked really hard to get to where you're at. But here's the honest truth. Like 99% of the people in this world would love to be where you're at. That's the thing. It's like, you've worked hard as hell to get there. And like, it wasn't easy for you. And you don't feel like even you reached your, like, you wanted to be even better.
Yeah.
But the honest truth is 99% of this world wants to be just where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. I had some great races with Andy Baxa, and it's funny, the extraneous motivation. Some of these races I'd be racing against Andy Baxa, and I'd have him. I would absolutely have him. And he'd have a brand new girlfriend that would be at the race watching. Ace card. That was Ace card. He would get motivated to go past me, and I'm like, it's a new girlfriend power. You can't top new girlfriend power. And that's a real thing.
And that's the truth. It's at the very end of the race. You said it perfect. Who's willing to suffer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's truly where it's at, because we all can only do so much with training and with genetics. At the end of the day, it comes down to how much are you willing to truly suffer to win.
Yeah.
And, some people, like, they're over dramatic in what they do, but others they just battle through it. And hell, they might pass out when they cross the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the people that truly go on to do great things because they show the grit. And that was you.
Well, and it was me on the short RPM races, but then I see other people with the longevity races, and I think there's a real art to outlasting someone over 100 miles.
Yeah.
I mean, just out there day in, day out, and saying, I'm gonna outsuffer you over hours, not minutes. I mean, that's a real legit thing there,
Yeah. 100 miles are a whole different. 100 miles plus are a whole different animal because, when you're suffering through a 5K or a 1 mile or even a half marathon, fueling's not a huge strategy.
No, not at all. Not
you
at
get
all.
100 miles.
Yeah.
Fueling is half the battle. If you don't figure out how to control your nutrition, your electrolytes, your, all of that, and not cause GI issues, and like, and I hate to say it, like there's so much noise now on like how many carbs you should take, how many calories you can take, but that's all different for everybody. So, but when you're doing a 5K or a 10K and stuff like that, half marathon, you can survive on just a little bit of water, you truly can. Throw in a few, throw in a gel maybe on a half marathon and you're good to go. But on 100 mile, like it's truly a strategy that you're building. Here's the thing is you can't build that strategy without doing it.
Yeah.
And it's taken a long time for me to even get to where I'm figuring it out. And, I've had a lot of shit go wrong, just like you have in your career.
Oh, yeah.
Like just even with 5Ks,
the learning curve.
Or marathons. Like how many, you said you had a dozen failures, marathons. Yeah.
And then I finally started figuring it out how to get it right. And then, it's funny, don't remember it actively, but I remember the first time Ethan Coffey really beat me, we had done Whitestone 30K. And for 17 and a half miles, I ran a brilliant race. And then with half a mile to go, I could start feeling the fingers tingle and I could start feeling the vision starting changing and the tunnel vision. And then the weight of the lactic acid. And then Ethan caught me and he said, "What the F are you doing?" I go, "I'm done. I am done." He goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "I'm done. Congrats." You could see the finish line. You just went straight this way and it was right there. And he was perplexed. I think he thought I was giving it to him. And I go, "No, I've got fuel issues. I'm half a mile short." And you could watch it happen with your bad vision and everything else. But I'm like, I'm half a mile short and you can't fix that. There's no way to fix that.
No, when you get behind in fuel on an actual race, it's hard to ever get it back. If you get behind on fuel in a backyard, you can suffer through it sometimes. If you're tough enough, you can figure it out. You can catch it back because you can, as long as you get back and you can get your nutrition under control. But in an actual race, if you get behind, you're behind. Like there's really no way to make it up if you're running like a short, fast race.
What do y'all eat for an ultra? Like I used to do for my 50K, I did, what do you call it? Uncrustables and Gatorade and stuff and stuff like that.
Yeah. Gels, Uncrustables.
The Yeti 50 was probably the most, I guess I was not the guy that ever think about nutrition. I just bought cases of gels, took them with me, mixed my electrolytes. But over the last year or two, I've really worked hard on trying to figure that out. And I'm still going through it some. But like for Yeti 50, I used Goo Octane hydration mix. It's 250 calories per scoop.
Wow.
I drank that and I had a Martin 160.
Yeah.
Which is, how many grams of carbs is that? 59?
Well, then,
so, I was over 100. I don't know, 110, 120 carbs an hour.
It's amazing how much water deficit you get, how dry you get out there.
Yes.
Yeah. Like what I've been working on over the last few like longer races is not relying on the gels.
Yeah.
I hate gels.
Really?
Like most of the gels I like during a marathon I can do the Morton gels and they do pretty well, but like over time the gels would make me like GI issues. You shoot one on your throat, you're done.
What do you go with instead?
So the last 50K I did, it was Goo Octane.
Yeah.
Through the whole race. And then when I ran out of that, I get to the aid station. They had First Form hydration mix, which is a higher carb calorie mix as well.
Yeah.
So I did the whole 50K on just liquids.
Yeah.
I had no food the whole time.
You know, what's funny is I think people underestimate how dry they get. Like even marathoners, they'll go home and they won't make urine for like 8 hours because they get so dry and they just ruin their kidneys. And you go further than that, almost twice as far as that.
Well, I'll tell you the scary part. Like, this is what
You've gone into Rabda before.
I sweat so much.
Yeah.
I sweat so much. I know Ethan sweats more than me. He's told me that.
It's amazing.
But my problem is I sweat so much salt.
Yeah.
So there's this device called H-Drop. You've never listened to this podcast, so you've not heard me talk about it. But H-Drop is a device I bought. It's about 250. But it literally measures your sweat concentration during a run. You just wear it. And it's a cool device. It's not one of those throwaways. It's literally like a watch. It will sync to a Garmin. It will not sync to Coros yet. Maybe Coros, if you're listening, fix that. But Garmin, it will sync and it will actually tell you. But what's really cool about this device is it tells you how much sodium concentration you're losing too.
That is fascinating.
So what's really awesome is that
it's just a watch. It's
an armband.
Almost like a diabetic.
Think about it like a heart rate monitor.
Yeah.
So it's literally just an armband that I put on, and you put it on your tricep. Okay. And you just start it. It's an app you start on your phone, and immediately it's got like a 10-hour battery life. So nothing major, but you can run most races with it.
Yeah.
But literally, as you're running, it measures the ounces that you sweat, your sodium loss, and your potassium loss.
That's amazing. That's really impressive.
And then at the end of the run, I can end the run, and it will tell me how much I've lost. But what's really cool is it will tell me how much to drink to replenish all of that over the next 2 to 3 hours to make sure that my body is primed and will recover correctly.
When coming from a medical background, I don't care about anything else but fluids and sodium and potassium. Yeah. That's all I care about.
But here's a crazy number. You know how much sodium I sweat in an hour?
I can't even imagine.
100 milligrams.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, even the app will tell me that I am extremely high compared to all the population.
Ruin some car seats.
Yeah. Now, like as far as actually hydration, like water that I'm losing, it says I'm medium. I lose like 30 ounces in an hour or something.
So you probably got to drink something a little bit salty then.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's another cool thing about this device is it will actually match your sweat loss, your sodium loss concentration to a hydration drink.
Oh wow!
To tell you you can look and pick which ones and it will tell you the salt per milliliter. Your sodium loss compared to what you did. So that's really cool too. But yeah, it says I need to average about I think LMNT is really close. It's close to me. It might be more.
Most of them now, most of the newer ones they're coming out with 1,000 because I think they realized that 320, 200 is not equivalent.
Not everybody sweats like that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, it's a really fine line because some people that don't sweat a lot of sodium, they start swelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how you can kind of tell. But I'll be honest with you, that device to me, $250. Anybody that runs should. First off, you need a heart rate monitor. That should always be first. Yeah. Second is that device.
They still haven't sent me one.
Because that to me has been the most valuable thing. At Yeti 50, at mile 46, I cramped up so bad, and now I know why. I go back and I added up all that goo octane and everything I was taking. I was nowhere near the sodium I needed to take.
No, it's not. No.
And I would have never known that because I've never taken a hydration. I've never done a sweat test.
Yeah, sure.
But this device, literally, as you're wearing it, it has a gauge on the app and it will tell you the amount of sodium you're losing. So
that's really impressive.
As this thing starts, so as your body starts losing sodium, this gauge will drop. And it will let you know that you're getting low on salt. So, you can start increasing your intake. Shit, that stuff's invaluable. That stuff we never had 10 years ago.
Ethan Coffey would really do well with that because he's a sweater. He doesn't do well with it. And then Todd Williams, when I was training with him, we would give him a hard time about how much, like, even 2 or 3 miles into a summer run, you could hear his shoes. They sound like sponges.
Yeah.
And he would get really sensitive about it. He's like, oh, this and this and that. I go, dude, you're sweating more than us. And he probably had the same little genetic deviation.
Yeah. I sweat a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if I sweat as much as Ethan. I know Ethan, he's told me his numbers. I don't think I'm there, but I've never had the sweat test like Ethan's had. All I've ever done is this device.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a lot. But I mean, the sodium content's crazy because, like, when I finished Yeti 50, people were commenting on my shorts.
Oh, wow.
I was wearing black shorts and they had a white line across them.
Yeah.
I won't name names, but I've had other running friends that have finished a hot weather race, a partial ultra, and they've had to have 9 or 10 liters of IV fluid. And
wow.
you're almost worried about long-term kidney damage at that point. I mean, that's just a catastrophic loss of fluids there.
Yeah.
You know?
I can't imagine getting that much.
It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a lot of fluids lost when you're not a hot weather runner and it's hot outside and you're getting dry. You know, that's scary.
Yeah.
You know?
What, so for you, like, take for instance the Pistol Ultra 50K. That's obviously your longest distance you've ran.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it's what, 5-6 miles over a marathon, but
Yeah.
that still plays a big difference in nutrition. Did you have to change anything in what you were doing?
You know, that one, I set up a little picnic table on the course. I had a little fold out picnic table and I did my Uncrustables. I did my Gatorades. I did my Coke with sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to get to that. I can't remember how long the course was. I was able to get to it 3 or 4 times during the race. And I think that played a big difference. You know, and then the availability of bathrooms and everything else. And so it didn't feel like a 50K. It felt like a long training run. And I think that's probably what helped me. You know, I think I'd probably be more insecure on a isolated trail run with no support trying to run 50K than I would with all my little tools with me, you know?
Yeah.
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 I mean, that race is a good atmosphere, though.
Oh, it's
I
fabulous.
don't know what it was like in 2015, but I just know the times I've ran it. It's a really
amazing
good
the
atmosphere.
level of detail that they would plan. I still remember some of the volunteers that were on the course. I remember Jennifer Powell Parker was out on the course, and I'd see a lot of my other friends. And I'm like, this is like a long training run, you know. And I started with Ethan and a couple other people, and then I remember seeing Tony Owens. I didn't know anything about ultra running, but I remember seeing Tony Owens show up 5 minutes before the start. I'm like, are you not warming up? He goes, yeah, I'm doing 100 miles. I don't need to warm up. And he was so casual and just carefree. And I was like, that's a right way to live right there, you know? So.
Yeah, 100 miles, the whole different ball game than a 50K.
Yeah. And I remember telling some of my middle school kids, he did another race. And my middle school parents didn't believe me. They're like, my daughter said you introduced them to some friend that ran a 100-mile race and this and that. And then Tony Owens was there. He goes, actually, it was a 115-mile race, but I didn't want to brag. I can't remember what 115-mile or 120-mile race he had done, but he didn't want to feel like it was embellishing. But I'm like, you get credit for it. You did a 120-mile race.
It was probably the Pistol that year.
It probably was.
I think that's probably the one that Bob was talking about that was long.
Yeah.
You know, these kids and their parents couldn't fathom it because they're used to doing a 2-mile race, and they're like, "You had a friend that did a 100-miler." I was like, "Oh yeah, I got some of those."
Well, you know, and it's overall at the end of the day, though, it's all relative to the effort.
Yeah,
you know, like a 100-mile race starts to hurt, but it's a whole different hurt than a 5K.
Well, it's not a chest burn hurt like a 5K is.
It is.
It's a long, like, everything just starts breaking.
I mean, there
down.
is an art to both events.
It's a substantially different pain, but it's still the same kind of pain, but over a longer duration. It is funny, the 5K guys will really rue the idea of doing a 100-miler, but the 100-miler guys don't want to do a 5K.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We were talking about that earlier. It's funny. Like, we might have been talking about that before the podcast.
There's a mutual fear.
There's a mutual respect there for each distance.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you can ask some of the guys in our group to do a 5K, or even the girls.
I know. I'm like, I'm signing up for all of them. Like, let's just run them off.
It's that lack of oxygen feeling.
It's not fun,
especially
when you don't train for it. Like when you train for 100 miles, everything's a little slower.
Well, these ultra guys that can train for 100 miles, they can just dissipate this amount of energy for this, and they just get through it, and then they get through the next one, and they can coach themselves through it, and they're like in a trance where it's not an issue.
It's like that picture that Nick sent of you.
Yeah.
You're never going to see 100-mile picture that looks like that.
Never. Yeah.
Because you, was that a 5K, 10K?
That was a 5K. That 5K. Was the 5K on Neyland. It's, what do you call it? It's on like the July 4th. What do you call it? Boomsday or I forget the name of it.
Yeah, Boomsday back in the day.
Yeah. I forget the name of it now. But
for anybody that doesn't know this picture, like
what is it called?
Is like
Fireball.
Who is like all you can see is white in his eyes. There's no pupils. There's no nothing. Like this man gave every ounce that he had in his body in his 5K, and like you just don't do that 100 miles. And if you do that, you're not going to finish it. Like that's the difference. But it's such an art because to do a 5K like that, you have to be like it's precision.
Yeah,
you get off your pace and you're not going to finish.
Yeah,
or you finish and you're like, oh, I didn't run hard enough.
Whereas at 100 mile, if you get too ambitious for just a couple of those miles, you're going to pay that same price.
Yeah, and you're going to sit in a chair for a really long time.
Yeah.
So it's a humbling experience.
Yeah. They're almost different sports. They're in the same niche, but they're almost different sports.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, before we go ahead and get you keyed up here.
Looking at them right now.
Questions together. But Stu, we're going to ask you the same question we ask everybody on this podcast.
Okay. And
that is, why do you run? At the end of the day, going through chemo, you've had cancer, you're trying to spend time with your family.
Yeah.
Things are really hard. But what keeps you going? Like, why do you continue to run? Like, what is your why?
It's really my stabilizer, and it's really a lot of my personality. A lot of my success goes back to running, and a lot of my social circle goes back to running. Even nowadays, if I'm going through a rough patch, I'll have a specific group of friends I meet every Sunday. You've been out there on one of those Sunday runs. I'm like, hey, let's go to our church. Let's do a Sunday run, and let's talk about everything. And it's probably equivalent of what going to the bar was in the 70s for a lot of guys. Like, hey, I need to hash out some issues, and I know this is a good circle and this won't get back to anyone, but this is what's going on. And you solve a lot of problems. It's amazing. You're away from the house for a couple hours. You might run for an hour, but you solve a lot of problems out there. Yeah. It's just hard to have angst after you go out for a run.
Yeah. It's a great answer. It's hard sometimes to explain that almost in a way you find yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
That's kind of like what you're doing. It's like sometimes you need a minute to find yourself and to reset.
Yeah. And we've got people of all varying degrees of success and pace, but we'll all show up. We used to have guys that showed up for our Sunday run. We'd have 2 or 3 dozen guys that showed up, and we get into smaller groups and everything else. But it's amazing the amount of help you can give or receive on some of those runs. Well,
and to be honest, like, are those some of the people that were there for you when you were going through cancer?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the thing about it is like when you form a relationship like that with someone or a community like that, a group like that, where you're meeting and you're doing that together, like that's a bond that doesn't really ever get broken. You may not talk for a long time, but damn it, you'll be right there for each other when you need to be.
Yeah, and I've still got some friends like that I haven't run with in years, or I've had course words with, but if they call me tomorrow, whatever they needed,
you drop whatever you do.
Absolutely. And it's a weird bridge of pain that you build with someone by putting all this mileage in and these hypoxic workouts, but it's legit. Me in particular, I recognize that I'm a product of environments. I've never been the fastest in any one circle of friends, and you have to recognize that my success is only because of them. You know what I mean? I mean, I might show up and do the work and everything else, but I've had other recruits. It's bizarre. Like, I've had other people that I've met later in life that did not go to UT that came up to me. One of them came up to me in a parking lot of a Memphis theater, and he's like, hey, I just broke 16 minutes in the 5K. What do you think about that? And then I had to look because I thought I was joking. And I was like, oh, well, good for you. And he goes, yeah, I'm doing that. And I thought he was talking about a workout or this or that. But he was the big fish in the small pond, so that was a big deal. I was in a pond where if you had to break 14 minutes in the 5K to even be able to talk about it, because there were other half dozen guys that had broken 14 minutes in the 5K at practice that day. And so that was kind of a life lesson that, you got to really have high circles. Otherwise, you were going to be proud of something that really wasn't worthy being proud of. I know that sounds awful, but this guy came in a recruit trip out here, settled out there, and his ambition was this, and our standards were this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, that might have been a guy that had not started running until 3 years ago, and
Yeah. And there's a longer story than this. This guy got a little mouthy with me on his recruiting trip, and the guys had to hold me off of him because he said a couple of insightful things to me, and I'm like, dude, you're a recruit. This is a charity trip. I don't even think we should sign you. And I'm like, and I'm one of the guys that's been kind to you, and this guy got mouthy with me, and I was like, I don't want to beat up a recruit, but I'm not above it. So, but at the same time, he ended up not going to UT and going somewhere else. But it's amazing. It was the first time in my life that I saw our standards were this and other people's standards were this. And
made you realize that you were better. You probably I hope you realized that you were much more talented than you thought.
It did, because, in at first trying to interpret if he was joking or not, I'm like, you're bragging about breaking 16 minutes in the 5K, but that's like a Tuesday workout for us. And I think it helped solidify that I need to maintain the best environments, and that's where you really get success. And you could have an abysmal workout with our guys where we do like 3 times a 2 mile at like 8:55, and you'd be upset about it. But that's a brilliant workout by anyone else's standards. But your standards were so high because you were surrounded by guys that were making Olympic teams left and right.
Yeah, that's very true. Like your vision of where you're at
depends a lot about your surroundings.
Yeah.
That's
the thing. That 16-minute mile to that guy, he might have been the best.
Oh, he was enthused. Yeah.
Whereas it would have been last in your group.
Yeah. And then so I kind of felt pity instead of angst towards him. I'm like, well, he thinks he's a big deal, and he probably is, and that's fine for him.
I mean, to his group, he probably is a huge deal. And, and kudos to him. But also kudos to everybody else who's like, and that's the thing. It's like, at the end of the day, you're just trying to be the best that you can be. Yeah. 15 minutes is your best, then awesome. Because that's still 97% better than most of the world. Like it truly is.
Yeah. And you take our group and you'd find a group of 100 East Africans. They're like, you let us know when you break 13 minutes in the 5K. You guys are funny. Huh?
Yeah. No matter how good you think you are, there's always
usually somebody better.
Amazing. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Williams, we'll turn it over to you for all of these listeners.
All right, I got a question about a story. An Oak Ridge guard check 13 miler. You start out at a 7-minute mile pace, and then you go down to a 6, and then you go all out on your last mile. Yeah,
I'm flattered I still have the last mile record at Oak Ridge. I don't remember what it is. It's 4:25, 4:35, something like that. The company out there was really prestigious. Like I remember one of the last miles, it was a who's who of people, and it's one of those things where you're like, I can't believe I'm running with these people, let alone at the tip of the spear. And they rearranged that section of the mile years later, so I don't think anyone will be able to get the mile record again because the terrain's changed too much. But a lot of people chase that mile record, and I think I've still got it, which is amazing to me.
According to Bob, you have a 4:25.
That's what it was. Yeah, I don't really keep records and everything, but that day in particular, Alan Horton went after that for the first half mile, and he was chasing 2 guys that were college runners, and they were fabulous runners. And then I didn't want to beat by I didn't want to get beat by a bunch of 18 or 19-year-olds. So I was just chasing Hortons, and then the last quarter mile it was open, and I went by those 2 college guys, and I couldn't believe I did it, So, and they were really successful college runners at that. And one of them, Clint McKelvey, is still just a masterful runner right now. I think Clint's probably run like 2:13 for the marathon and like 1:03 for the half. I mean, he's a ringer. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You must have been going all out.
Yeah, no kidding.
It was just one of those grudge matches.
Everything clicked, right?
Everything clicked, and I think that one just Horton led the chase, and then I just said all I got to do is close now. And it was, I think me and Horton just don't want to get beat by a bunch of college guys. That's the only thing that worked out. I can't imagine running 4:25 right now.
Do you know what year that was?
Oh, it was so long ago. The guys in question, like Clint McKelvey and Sonnenfeld was the other kid that ran for Kentucky, and then Duke, I believe. They've probably been out of college for a while. It's probably been between 10 and 15 years ago. It was a long time ago. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is, if you listen to music while running, what do you listen to?
Most people tell you it's Rage Against the Machine, Tool, Helmet, a lot of new rap. I like very fast beat. A lot of my friends listen to documentaries or podcasts, but I don't know how you could listen to that while running. I like the rhythm, and I don't know how many years I am into it, but one of my kids got some Apple iPods and talked me into getting a pair for me. And it's amazing what you can do with a watch. I mean, it's just the amount of information. Like, I could be on call for work and that can come through, and I can get Pandora or Spotify or anything else.
Yep.
And Strava's on there. I mean, it's just amazing the time we live in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a long way away from the pre-website days, right?
Oh yeah. I still remember the first time I ran with a set of headphones. My brother gave me a set of Nike headphones, and I probably ran 4:30 for the first mile of a 2-mile tempo. And I mean, just the idea of having music while you're running was crazy.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
All right, the next one is, what was the toughest part of your cancer treatment for you?
Really underestimating how much support my family needed. And then, I got so involved in just getting through my task and everything else, and all of that became relatively easy, but not anticipating that the family still had some uncertainty, and I left a lot of that untreated. You get so involved in your tunnel vision about yourself that you don't see the needs of others, and probably could do better at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, my last question is, what is the best running memory and the worst?
That's a tough question. Probably the best running memory is probably my first All-American, and that was at University of Arkansas cross country my junior year. And I think that kind of came out of the blue. I was 18th overall at NCAA cross, and just kind of hit the right race on the right day. And I was right in the top 10 at one point, but the last mile I was so delirious. I'm like, man, I'm way up front, and some people got in front of me over the last mile, but I just was so just fascinated. I'm like, man, I'm up front at the biggest day, race of the biggest day. And it fascinates me that the bigger the race, chances are the more likely big people won't be able to handle the pressure. It's never an issue for me. The bigger the race, the chances are I'm going to be just as reliable as I'm going to be, but half the other people will fall off. And I feel bad for them. I mean, no one wants to fall off on the biggest day, but it just never happened to me. That was probably was my first All-American. And my brother and some other college friends had rented a car and drove out there, and it was just a big day. I don't know what my worst would be. It would probably be just the culmination of trying to chase the Olympic Trials qualifier, which was 2:22 at the time, and I ran 2:23, and just not being able to figure out the little things to get there. But I think I did everything I could. But
yeah, well, you left it all out there.
Yeah,
for sure.
I did, and doing anything on top of that would have thrown off the balance of the house. And when you got a wife and kids and a job, you're like, something's got to give. And I might get the qualifier, but at what sake is that going to be?
Yeah, what do you sacrifice to get there?
Yeah, it's a hard balance.
You did say something earlier that I meant to ask you a question about, but you alluded to a magazine you were in.
Yeah, there used to be a running magazine that covered a lot of local results. It was called Running Journal, and that class that I took with my wife, I was on the cover of a race from Columbia, South Carolina. It was an 8K, and I ran a pretty fast time, but it was just bizarre that Dr. Farr would remember me being on the cover just at the same time as I was taking this class. And then my wife would be in the same class and just be in the midst of wanting to talk to me about it. And even then, she came from a family of people that were horse people. So she wasn't in a hurry to talk to a distance runner.
Yeah.
That wasn't on her radar at all. So
That's kind of cool, though.
Yeah.
I think Rob talked about the Running Journal at one point.
Probably.
Yeah.
Because it's not around anymore.
It's not around, but it was a great little thing. And you would look at the Running Journal, like what races are out there, what races are paying, what races are nearby. And then some races would get these big sponsors and they would say, hey, if you're a sub 23:30 runner, come on out and we'll pay for your travel, we'll pay for your hotel. And you get 24 guys out there that were really competitive. And you're like, oh, this will be good. And then some guys were chasing money, some guys were chasing time, but you get 24 guys out there that were just out there to kill each other. Great time,
Did you have to verify your time before you went, or you just show up?
They would look it up. They would say, where'd you run this at? And they would look it up, and they kind of knew who was who. One of those races was in Birmingham. It was a Vulcan 10K. And I remember showing up. One of my college buddies showed up. I think he was trying to pay his rent. And I had been telling him I was doing this race. And I was like, I don't know why you're showing up to do this race to pay your rent, because I've already said I was doing this race, and I'm not gonna charitably let you get in front of me. and so I think I did Vulcan 10K, and one year I broke 30 minutes and I was like 8th, and the next year I broke 29:30 and I was like 2nd or 3rd. But there were literally 24 guys that came from everywhere in the South to run it, and I'm like, man, this is incredible. And you go out to eat with these guys the night before, and then you go out to eat with these guys after, and it was a good, kind of a weird time for grassroots development,
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, Stu, we've definitely taken plenty of your time. I think we're about 2 hours in at this point, which is about normal for a podcast at this point. But do you have any questions for us?
No, I'm flattered with the time. I'm flattered with everything y'all are doing for the racing community. I'm genuinely taken aback. It's surreal for me to be a topic of conversation here. I think objectively, y'all have done a lot more that's fascinating for me to talk about. It's funny to get to a point in your life where you get to talk about your own accomplishments in the midst of people that have probably done more, but in a different fashion. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't feel like we've even skimmed the surface of all of your accomplishments. I almost feel like we should have another podcast at some point next year or later this year and go into more of your races, because we've talked a lot, but I don't think we really went into detail about some of your training, some of your races, even your cross-country coaching.
Yeah.
So I would like to really get into that.
Yeah, I'll come back.
And talk some more. So maybe we do another one in a few months.
Yeah, I'd be game for that for sure.
I would love to pick your brain some more.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm like really fascinated about is, we had Matt Blankenship on.
Yeah.
And he, played at UT.
Yeah.
I didn't know you ran at UT until we got in here and started talking about it. So to me, that's really cool that you get to talk to people who were, at one point the best at what they were doing, and they went to college for it.
Yeah.
And so listening to some of these stories is hey, I want to know more about what happened here, or some of those races in college, because to me that's really interesting.
Well, it was a fascinating time for me because I was at UT at the same time that Heath Schuler was there, or Todd Helton was there, or Peyton Manning was there, and they were just regular people.
Yeah.
And that fascinates me, that someone you see on TV now that everyone loves and adores. I'm like, he was just a regular, just classic guy that lived 2 doors down from me.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I will say this, of all, since we've started this podcast, your name has come up several times for me to get on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I had you on the list. I've just been, And I'm one of those guys, like, I'm not the best planner. So what I do is I try to like schedule 5 or 6 people in a row.
Yeah.
And then I don't schedule again until I run out of those 6, then I do it again. So eventually, like, I get the full list. But there's some weeks I tell Matt, I'm like, we don't have anybody this week. I'll keep working on the one we got. But, I slowly come around, but your name come up like 4 or 5 times.
I'm genuinely flattered.
So, I mean, and that's where, like, when we go all the way back into this podcast and we talk about, like, the people that stepped up to help you in your life.
Oh, it's amazing. It really is.
You say, like, you don't feel like you could pay them back. Well, you have, just by being there and doing the things that you've done. And I hope you know that, because, like, people recommended you so much for this podcast because of who you are. And I hope you realize that, like, you truly are remarkable at what you do, and you've set a gold example for Knoxville and for what you do. And thank you so much for taking the time to be on this podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate the time.
Definitely want to have you back on here.
I appreciate it. And, this isn't something I'm good at. I've been stoic and guarded and everything else. I don't talk about my own accolades. The best compliment a lot of my athletes gave me is at the end of the season were like, I didn't know you were a runner. I didn't know you were good. And which is good, because I haven't made it about myself at that point. And, I think it'd be fascinating one of these days to get Bax out here or to get Jonesy out here. I think that'd be a good conversation.
We need to get him on here, then.
Oh, Jonesy would be really animated. It'd be awesome. Yeah.
Well, I'll have to get him scheduled.
Yeah.
For sure.
I'd like that. Yeah. Yeah.
And then maybe one day we'll have a whole group. We'll get you, Ethan, Andy.
Oh, that'd be lovely. It'd be awesome. And I'm a big fan of Ethan Coffey, and I think I'd like to be out here the next time he does one, because I think it'd be fascinating.
Yeah, we should do a group one day.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll do it.
Yeah.
Stu, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Truly, it's been awesome to listen to a part of your story. We definitely want to get you back on here to do the rest of your story, because I don't feel like you've told it all.
For sure. Yeah.
But thank you so much. And, hopefully we, in our side conversations before and during the pause of this podcast, we're just so everybody knows we're trying to talk Stu into a backyard. But, we'll see if that happens, but no pressure. Stu, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We
Thank you
really
so much.
appreciate your
This has been awesome.
And thank you so much for coming in person. These are always so much better in person.
I know when he wrote me today, it's like, hey, he's coming in person. I'm like, another in person. Awesome.
Yeah, Matt was extremely excited.
Well, it's a good trade. I have a 45-minute drive out here, but I'm like, in person is so much better.
Yeah.
Now you got a 45-minute drive back, though.
It's all right. I'll be all right. Yeah. I think traffic's died down,
There's no traffic tonight.
Well, Stu, thank you so much.
Gladly.